Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. I had been looking for a place I could actually afford, and the ad for the apartment seemed too good to pass up. Second-hand furnished, utilities mostly included, on the quiet side of town where rent was usually ridiculous. The landlord said the last tenant had left in a hurry, but everything was already set up. Couch, coffee table, bed, even dishes in the cupboard. It felt like walking into someone else's life, which was a little unnerving at first, but I told myself it was practical. I would not have to shop for furniture. I could just move in with my clothes and books and call it home. The first night was awkward, like it always is when you are sleeping somewhere new. The air felt different, like the apartment had been closed up too long. There was a faint smell, almost like damp wood, but I figured it was just from the old building. I unpacked a little, set my phone charger on the nightstand, and tried to sleep. The bed was a little too firm, but I reminded myself I was lucky to have one included at all. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to this faint sound, a dull thud, soft enough that it could have been nothing. I thought maybe it was a neighbor, someone above me dropping something on the floor. I stayed still for a while, half awake, listening. It came again. Thud. Not loud, just heavy, muffled, then nothing. I eventually drifted back off, telling myself it was the pipes or the building settling. The second night it happened again, around 2 a.m. Thud. I sat up in bed this time, straining my ears. The apartment was otherwise silent. No cars on the street outside, no humming fridge, just the occasional creak of the old place. Then, thud. I got up, checked the window, peeked into the hall. Nothing. I ended up pacing around barefoot for 10 minutes, trying to figure out where it was coming from, before finally crawling back into bed. I tried to laugh it off. New place, new noises. That was all. By the third night I had convinced myself it was normal. Old buildings make sounds, right? Except I noticed something different this time. The sound was not random. It was rhythmic. Like a steady beat, slow and deliberate. Thud, pause, thud, almost like a knock but duller, heavier, as if something was pressing against wood from the inside, and it was not coming from the ceiling or the walls. It was right beneath me. I remember lying perfectly still, holding my breath, trying to tell myself it was just my imagination. My heart was racing so hard I could feel it in my ears. I slid one hand down the side of the mattress, letting my fingers brush against the frame. The wood felt cool, solid, ordinary. But every time I tried to convince myself it was nothing, the sound came again. Thud. That night I barely slept. I stayed up scrolling through my phone, watching old shows on low volume, anything to keep my mind from going back to the noise. At some point, I pulled all the blankets tight around me and told myself that if there really was something wrong with the bed, I would just replace it. It was second-hand anyway. Maybe the frame was loose, or the springs inside were shifting when I moved. There had to be some logical reason. In the morning, I actually got down on my knees and checked underneath. The bed frame was one of those bulky ones with drawers built into the sides, heavy and solid. There was no visible space beneath it. No legs or open floor, just wood panels going all the way down. I knocked on one of them, and it made a hollow sound, empty inside. I remember thinking it was weirdly designed, but I shrugged it off. Cheap furniture always has quirks. For the rest of the day, I tried not to think about it. I met up with a friend, ran errands, tried to keep myself busy, but the thought kept sneaking back. The hollow frame, the sound in the night. I started wondering about the last tenant. Why did they move out so quickly? Why leave all their things behind? The landlord had brushed it off, but I kept replaying it in my head. People do not usually abandon fully furnished apartments unless something is wrong. That night, I told myself I would not give in to paranoia. I was tired, I had work in the morning, and I needed rest. I left the bedside lamp on, just in case. Hours passed quietly, and I actually started to feel relieved. Maybe whatever it was had stopped. Maybe it was really just in my head. I was drifting off when I heard it again. Thud. Not faint this time. Louder, sharper, directly beneath me, like something slamming against the inside of the wood. I sat bolt upright, clutching the blankets, my whole body trembling. Another thud followed, heavier, rattling the lamp on the nightstand. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and turned on the flashlight. My first thought was to jump off the bed, to get away from it, but I was frozen in place. I aimed the light down at the side of the frame, and for a split second, I thought I saw the wood shift, just slightly, like the surface was flexing outward. I blinked hard, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. The sound stopped. Just silence. I stayed like that until dawn, sitting upright, eyes locked on the frame. At some point I must have dozed off, because I woke to the morning light creeping through the blinds, still holding the phone in my hand. Everything looked normal, too normal. I do not know why I did not call the landlord right then and there, or why I did not just move the mattress onto the floor and forget the frame entirely. Maybe I did not want to admit how afraid I was. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could handle it. But that was the beginning. The first time I knew, without a doubt, that something was inside that bed. And I was lying directly on top of it. The next day at work, I could barely focus. I sat through meetings, nodding at the right times, answering emails that made no sense, and sipping coffee just to keep my eyes open. But underneath all that, I felt restless, like my skin was too tight. Every time I thought about the sound, the hollow thuds beneath the bed, my stomach clenched. I kept replaying it in my head, over and over, and each time it felt more real, less like something I could brush off as imagination. During lunch, I searched for information on the apartment building, trying to find any reviews or stories from previous tenants. I thought maybe I would stumble onto someone complaining about the furniture, or about the landlord, or even just some history that would explain why the last person left everything behind. But there was nothing. Just the usual rental listings and a few old property records. That evening, I told myself I was going to be brave. I had convinced myself the night before that the frame was hollow, that maybe the noise came from shifting wood. Still, I stopped by the hardware store on the way home and bought a small crowbar. My plan was simple: pry open one of the panels, check inside, and put my fears to rest. If there was nothing, I could patch it up with a bit of wood filler and forget about it. When I got home, though, the bed looked so ordinary that I hesitated. The mattress was neatly in place, the frame solid, nothing out of order. For a while, I just stood in the doorway staring at it, crowbar in hand, trying to work up the courage. Eventually, I set the tool down on the dresser and told myself I would do it later. Maybe after dinner, maybe tomorrow. But then night came, and with it, the dread. I lay in bed with the lamp on again, scrolling my phone, pretending to relax. Every creak of the building made me jump. I kept shifting, adjusting the pillows, trying to convince myself I was tired enough to sleep. Then came the first thud. It was quieter this time, almost tentative, as though whatever was inside knew I was listening. I froze, holding my breath, my eyes wide open. Another thud followed, then silence. I reached over and picked up the crowbar. My hands were slick with sweat. I climbed off the bed slowly, as quietly as I could, and crouched beside the frame. My heart was pounding so loud I was afraid it would drown out any sound. I pressed my ear to the wooden panel, and for a second I swore I heard breathing. Shallow, ragged breaths, muffled by the wood. I jerked back, heart hammering, and stumbled to my feet. I nearly dropped the crowbar. I was shaking so hard I had to set it down again. I kept pacing the room, staring at the bed like it was alive. My rational brain kept shouting at me to tear it open, to prove there was nothing inside. But the rest of me, the terrified part, was screaming not to touch it. I did not sleep that night. I ended up dragging a blanket to the couch and lying there with the TV on until morning. When the sun came up, the whole thing felt ridiculous. I was an adult, hiding from my own furniture. I forced myself back into the bedroom and checked the frame. No scratches, no cracks, no sign of damage. Just smooth wood. I tapped it with my knuckle, and it sounded as hollow as before. That weekend, I invited a friend over under the pretense of needing help rearranging furniture. I wanted another set of eyes on it, someone who might laugh and tell me it was all in my head. My friend helped me move the couch, the dresser, even the bed itself a few feet across the room. At one point, he even rapped his knuckles on the side of the frame and said, "Cheap stuff, hollow as hell." I forced a laugh, relieved and embarrassed. He stayed for dinner, we watched a movie, and by the time he left I was almost convinced I had overreacted. That night, I tried sleeping in the bed again. I left the light on low, but otherwise forced myself into my usual routine. Hours passed quietly, and I was just beginning to relax when I heard it again. Thud. I froze, staring at the ceiling. Another thud followed, louder, closer to where my head was resting. I slid off the mattress in one motion, crouched beside the frame with the crowbar, and pressed my ear to the wood again. This time, there was no mistaking it. The sound of air, ragged and uneven, like lungs straining for breath. I bolted out of the room, heart hammering, and slammed the door shut. I slept on the couch again, but even then, I could swear I heard faint knocking from the other side of the wall, like it was following me through the apartment. The next morning I told myself enough was enough. I was going to open the frame no matter what. I set the mattress aside, braced myself, and jammed the crowbar into one of the seams. The wood splintered with a loud crack, and I pried the panel open. Dust puffed out, and I squinted into the dark space inside. It was empty. I laughed out loud, half in relief, half in madness. My hands were shaking, but the space was just that, a hollow compartment. No sign of anything alive, no evidence of anything strange. I even shone my phone flashlight inside and saw nothing but wood. I replaced the mattress, patched the panel as best as I could, and told myself I had finally proven it. There was nothing there. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in a week. But at 2 a.m, I woke up to the sound of breathing. And this time, it was not muffled. It was right next to my ear. The sound of breathing was so close that I could feel the heat of it brush against the tiny hairs on my ear. I lay frozen in the bed, every muscle locked in place. My first instinct was to fling the covers off and bolt, but the terror rooted me where I was. My mind was racing, trying to explain it away, trying to pin the noise on something logical, the heater, the neighbor, even my own imagination. But deep down, I knew. I knew the sound of lungs. I knew what it was like to hear another person inhale and exhale in the same room. I rolled slowly onto my back, terrified that if I moved too quickly, I might actually see someone leaning over me. My heart was thundering in my chest so loudly I thought it might drown out the noise, but no, the breathing was steady, deliberate, wet. It had weight to it. I forced myself to flick on the lamp. The room flooded with warm yellow light, and I whipped my head around, scanning every corner. No one. The space beside the bed was empty, The door was still shut, the closet closed, but I could still hear it. I leaned over the side of the bed, looking down toward the floor. My phone flashlight trembled in my hand as I shined it along the frame. Nothing, just dust motes floating in the glow. The sound seemed to retreat, faint but still there, like it was being pulled back into the wood. I didn't stay in that room another second. I grabbed my pillow and blanket, sprinted into the living room, and locked the bedroom door behind me. The couch was small and stiff, but I wrapped myself tight in the blanket and kept every light in the apartment burning until dawn. The next day, I called the landlord. I told him there was something wrong with the bed frame, that I needed it replaced, that it was making noises. He gave me this long pause, then said, "The furniture comes with the place. If you don't like it, you're welcome to get your own." Well, Dowd, I almost told him everything, but the words stuck in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That something was living inside it, that I heard breathing. That sounded insane, and I could practically hear the judgment in his silence already. I hung up instead, furious, but also relieved I hadn't spilled the truth. That evening, I dragged the mattress onto the floor. No way was I sleeping on the frame again. I stacked the pillows up, tried to make it comfortable, and sat with my back against the wall, staring at the bed. For hours, nothing happened. Just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the occasional car passing outside. I almost managed to doze off, the exhaustion catching up to me. Then, just after 1 in the morning, the first thud came. The sound echoed through the hollow frame like a drum, sharp and unmistakable. I jolted upright, every nerve screaming. The mattress on the floor put me lower to the ground, eye level with the base of the bed. I watched as dust trickled down from a seam in the wood, like something was shifting inside. Then came another thud, louder, closer to the edge. I crept toward it, heart hammering, and pressed my ear to the wood again. This time, there was no mistaking it. Not just breathing, but movement. A shuffle, the sound of skin dragging against the wood, fingernails scratching, slow and deliberate. I stumbled back, clutching my phone. My flashlight beam shook as I shined it across the panels. For a split second, I swore I saw a gap widen between two boards, like something was pressing from the inside. But when I blinked, it was solid again. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called my friend again, the one who had helped me move furniture. I told him the truth this time, every detail, my voice shaking. He didn't laugh. He didn't call me crazy. Instead, he frowned, thought for a moment, then said, "You should get rid of that bed, tonight." That evening, he came over with a truck. Together, we stripped the bed down, yanking the mattress off, hauling it out, then dragging the frame itself toward the door. The wood groaned under our grip, heavier than it had any right to be. My friend muttered under his breath, "Feels like something's in it." We carried it down the stairs, out the back of the building, and dumped it by the dumpster. My friend was ready to smash it apart right there, but I told him no. I don't even know why. Maybe I was afraid of what we'd find. Maybe I thought destroying it would make it angry. Whatever it was, we left it there, broken, battered, sitting in the cold night air. I slept on the mattress on the floor again, too tired to care about comfort. For the first time in days, the night passed quietly. No thuds, no breathing. But in the morning, when I opened my door to leave for work, the bed frame was sitting right there in the hallway, upright, leaning against my apartment door. I nearly fell backward from the shock. My friend had driven it across town to another dumpster. He had texted me afterward to confirm. There was no way it should have been there. I pushed it down the hall, my hands trembling, my breath coming fast and shallow. I left it at the far end, by the stairwell, and sprinted back into my apartment, locking the door behind me. All day at work, I could think of nothing else. The image of it leaning there like it had walked itself back wouldn't leave my head. When I came home that evening, the hallway was empty. I felt relief for a moment, until I opened my apartment door and found it propped against the wall inside, waiting. That night, the thuds were louder than ever, and when I pressed my ear to the wood again, I heard something new. A voice, low, rasping, broken. It whispered, "Let me out." I thought that sleeping on the couch would fix things. I convinced myself that maybe the noises I had been hearing were part of some weird dream. The kind of half-asleep illusion where you wake up swearing you saw or heard something, but when the sun comes up, it falls apart. I even laughed about it to myself the next morning, sitting with a mug of coffee that tasted more bitter than usual. I tried to shake it off, but when I walked back into the bedroom to grab my work clothes, I noticed something that turned my stomach. The blanket I had left crumpled on the couch was gone. It wasn't in the living room, not on the floor, not draped over a chair. My first thought was that maybe I had carried it back in the night without remembering, like sleepwalking. But I knew I had locked the bedroom door. The key was still on the kitchen counter where I left it. And yet, when I pushed open the bedroom door, there it was, neatly folded at the foot of the bed. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. I kept telling myself it was me, that there had to be some rational explanation, because the alternative was too disturbing to entertain. I decided not to dwell on it, told myself that I was tired and slipping into paranoia, and I tried to bury myself in work for the rest of the day. That night, though, I could not bring myself to sleep in the bedroom again. I stayed on the couch, TV running low just to fill the silence. I must have drifted off, because sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of something heavy dragging across the floor. It came from the bedroom. I froze. My body screamed at me to stay put, but my curiosity fought against it. I sat up slowly, every nerve on edge, and strained to hear. The sound was steady, deliberate. A long scrape, then a pause, then another scrape, like furniture being pulled inch by inch. My heart was hammering, but I couldn't sit still any longer. I crept toward the hall, every floorboard groaning under my weight. The bedroom door was cracked open. I know I had locked it. I leaned in just enough to see the bed. It had been moved. The whole frame, which took 2 movers to bring in, had been shifted away from the wall, sitting crooked across the floor. And lying on top of the mattress, tucked in neatly under my sheets, was the blanket I had used on the couch. I backed away before I could even process it. I didn't run. I just kept stepping backward until I was in the living room again. Then I grabbed my keys and shoes and left the apartment entirely. I spent the rest of the night in my car parked down the street. The next morning, I forced myself back inside. I told myself I would pack a bag, maybe stay with a friend for a few days. I was exhausted and strung out from the night before, but I knew I could not live like this. When I walked into the bedroom again, everything was back in place. The bed had been pushed neatly against the wall, the blanket folded at the foot, and the sheets smoothed flat as if no one had touched them. If not for the deep drag marks gouged into the hardwood floor, I might have believed I had hallucinated the whole thing. I tried to explain it to the landlord, called him up and told him I was worried someone had a key, that maybe there was a break-in. He sounded annoyed more than anything else. Said the building was old, the locks were fine, and if I was that scared I should call the police. I almost did, but what would I say? That my bed had moved overnight? That my blanket was folding itself and I heard noises in the walls? They would laugh, or worse, they would take me seriously in the wrong way, and I would end up sounding unstable. So I said nothing. That evening, after pacing the apartment for hours, I finally worked up the courage to lift the mattress and look under the bed frame. The wood creaked as I crouched down. My flashlight beam trembled as I angled it into the hollow space. At first I thought it was empty, but then I saw the scratches. Hundreds of them, gouged deep into the wood on the inside of the frame, long, uneven claw marks, as if someone had been scraping with fingernails for weeks, maybe longer. My stomach dropped. I pulled back, nearly tripping as I scrambled away from the bed. I told myself again and again that I needed to get out, but instead of packing, I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the locked bedroom door. Something about it felt like a challenge. If I left, it would mean surrendering the place. If I stayed, maybe I would get answers. That was my mistake. That night, the noises came back, louder this time. Not just dragging, but knocking. Thumps from inside the bed frame, shaking the floorboards. I sat rigid on the couch, clutching my phone like a lifeline, but I couldn't bring myself to dial anyone. The sound went on for what felt like hours. When it finally stopped, I almost cried with relief. But just before dawn, when I started to drift into an uneasy sleep, I heard it. A laugh. High-pitched, ragged, like it had not been used in years. It came from the bedroom, from inside the bed. I stayed awake until the light started creeping through the blinds. I could not bring myself to walk back into that bedroom. I sat on the couch like a guard posted at the front of a tomb, every muscle in my body stiff, phone clutched in my hand as if it could protect me. My head kept nodding forward, my body begging for rest. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard that laugh again in my memory and snapped awake. When the sun was fully up, I tried to convince myself it had been a dream. Maybe sleep deprivation was playing tricks on me. Maybe I had imagined the scraping, the thuds, even the laugh. People have night terrors. People hallucinate when they are exhausted. But then I saw something that tore the excuse apart. The bedroom door was wide open. I had left it shut, locked, I was certain. But now it was open, and the smell drifting out was enough to gag me. Rotting meat, sweat, mildew, a sour, heavy stink that clung to the back of my throat. I covered my mouth with my sleeve and forced myself to look inside. The bed was no longer flush against the wall. It had been pulled forward again, and this time it was tilted at an angle, as if something had climbed out from underneath and forgotten to push it back in place. The sheets were rumpled. The blanket I had folded neatly the day before was crumpled in the middle, like someone had been lying under it. I wanted to grab my keys and just walk out forever. But there was a pull I could not resist, the kind of sick curiosity that keeps you staring at a car accident when you should look away. I crept toward the bed. My hand shook as I crouched down and lifted the hanging edge of the blanket. It was empty. The hollow inside the frame yawned back at me like an open mouth. Scratches carved deeper now, darker, raw wood exposed. For a second I thought I saw movement at the far corner, but when I blinked it was gone. My flashlight beam trembled across the space, catching only gouges and dust. I stood up too fast and had to steady myself against the wall. My breath came in sharp gasps. Something was wrong with the air in that room. Too heavy. It felt like someone else was breathing it with me. I spent the rest of the day in the kitchen, unable to leave but unable to sit still. I kept the TV on for noise, but no matter how loud it was, I swore I heard soft bumps and scrapes behind the bedroom wall. At one point I thought I heard a whisper. My name, drawn out slow, like a hiss. By evening, I was unraveling. I had not showered, had not eaten more than a handful of crackers. I stared at my phone, scrolling through contacts, hovering over names. Who could I tell? What could I say? That a man lived inside my bed frame. That my blanket folded itself. That laughter seeped out of the floorboards. No one would believe me. I tried the landlord again. He ignored my call. Straight to voicemail. I almost left a message begging him to remove the bed, to take it out of the apartment no matter the cost. But my pride stopped me. I did not want to sound like a lunatic on a recording he could play back and laugh at, so I stayed. That night, I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair. It made me feel better, though a small voice in my head reminded me that the door had been open that morning despite the lock. I curled on the couch again, clutching my phone and a kitchen knife. At exactly 3:17, the noises started. First, the scratching, slow, rhythmic, like nails raking wood, then the thuds, pounding from inside the bed frame, shaking the floor. My chest seized as I held my breath, knife gripped so tightly my knuckles ached. Then came the voice, closer than before, not muffled through wood, but right outside the bedroom door, a low, ragged whisper. "Let me out." I froze. The knife trembled in my hand. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my body would not move. The thuds grew louder, harder. Dust sifted down from the ceiling with each impact. Then, silence. I waited. Seconds dragged like hours. And then, in the silence, I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Deeper, ragged, wet. Coming from the hallway, coming closer. The chair bracing the bedroom door creaked. The wood groaned. Something was pressing against it from the inside. I snapped out of my paralysis and bolted for the front door. I yanked it open and ran down the hallway barefoot, not even thinking to grab my keys or bag. I did not stop until I was outside in the cold night air, my breath tearing out in ragged gasps. I slept in my car again, parked 3 blocks away. The next morning I forced myself back inside. I had to. My wallet, my ID, everything was still in the apartment. I inched open the front door, heart pounding, and peered inside. The chair that I had braced against the bedroom door was splintered on the floor. The door itself hung open, one hinge broken clean off. The bed had been dragged into the center of the room, sheets tangled and twisted as if something had clawed its way out violently. On the kitchen counter sat my folded blanket, neat, precise, like a mocking gesture. I could not stop shaking. I packed a bag with whatever I could grab and fled. I told myself I would never go back. But when I reached my car, there was something waiting on the windshield. A drawing. Crayons on torn paper, jagged and frantic. It showed a stick figure lying in bed, and another, larger figure, crouched underneath it, clutching a knife. The handwriting at the bottom was messy, uneven, but I could read it. Tonight. When I held that crayon drawing in my hands, something inside me broke. I knew I could not keep pretending this was stress, or sleep deprivation, or my imagination running wild. Someone, or something, was in that apartment, and they wanted me to know they were coming. I stood in the parking lot, gripping the paper so hard it crumpled, my eyes darting to every car, every shadow, convinced that the man from the bed frame was out there watching me. I had 2 options: leave forever and accept losing everything I had inside, or go back in and end it. For reasons I still do not fully understand, I chose the second. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was rage at being hunted in my own home. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't just prey. I went to the hardware store and bought a hammer, a crowbar, and a roll of duct tape. I told myself I was going to rip that bed apart piece by piece until nothing was left of it. If he was still inside, I would drag him out into the daylight. If he was gone, I would at least destroy the place he had been hiding. That night, I unlocked the door with shaking hands. The apartment smelled foul again, like damp earth and rotting food. I closed the door behind me and stood there for a long time, clutching the hammer, listening. Silence pressed in on all sides. I walked into the bedroom. The bed was back against the wall, perfectly aligned, blanket neatly folded on top. It looked like it had been staged, like a showroom piece in a furniture store. The sight of it nearly made me vomit. I ripped the blanket away and slammed the hammer down on the frame. The wood splintered under the first blow, a hollow crack ringing through the room. I kept swinging, again and again, until sweat dripped down my back and my arms trembled. The side panel tore loose. The hollow inside was deeper than I had ever realized. A dark cavity that stretched all the way under the slats, almost like a box built to contain something. And inside, piled against the far wall of the hollow, were things. Clothes, wrappers, bones. I froze, the hammer slipping in my hands. The bones were small, some yellowed with age, some still dark with marrow. Fragments of ribs, long, thin finger bones, a jaw that looked human but too small, like a child's. And then I saw the Polaroids, dozens of them, stacked haphazardly. My stomach dropped as I flipped through them. Pictures of me sleeping, pictures of me eating at the kitchen table, pictures of me brushing my teeth, each one taken from angles inside the apartment, some from places I didn't even know had a line of sight. I backed away, bile rising in my throat. My legs hit the mattress and I stumbled, almost falling into the hollow. That was when I heard it, breathing. Not my own. Low and raspy, like air dragging through a collapsed lung. It was coming from deeper inside the hollow, where the shadows pooled so thick the flashlight beam could not reach. I dropped the hammer, snatched up the crowbar, and jabbed it into the darkness. The metal struck something soft. A grunt echoed back. Then, movement. A figure lurched out, unfolding itself from the hollow like a spider pulling free of its nest. He was emaciated, skin gray and stretched tight over bone, hair hanging in filthy clumps. His eyes were wide, wild, black pits in his face, and in his hand he clutched the knife I had seen before, blade streaked with rust. For a second, we stared at each other. My heart thudded so loud it drowned out everything else. He smiled. His teeth were broken, jagged. "You brought me home," he rasped. The same words I had heard in my dreams, in the scratching beneath the bed. He lunged. I swung the crowbar with all the strength I had left. It connected with a sickening crack against his temple. He collapsed halfway out of the hollow, limbs jerking. I swung again and again, until he stopped moving. Silence swallowed the room. I dropped the crowbar and staggered back, chest heaving. My hands were slick with sweat and blood, though I could not tell if it was his or mine. My body trembled violently, my brain refusing to believe what my eyes were showing me. The man lay sprawled halfway out of the bed frame, one arm twisted beneath him, knife fallen to the carpet. His chest rose and fell shallowly, still alive. I called the police. When they arrived, I could barely string sentences together. They dragged him out of the hollow and hauled him away. I heard one of the officers mutter, "How the hell was he even alive in there?" Another said something about malnourishment, about how long he must have been living like that. I moved out that night, left everything behind except for a backpack with my ID and a change of clothes. I never went back. In the weeks that followed, I kept an eye on the news, waiting for a story about the man. There was nothing. No report, no article, no mugshot. When I called the station for information, they told me there was no record of a call from my address that night. But I know what I saw. I know what I fought. Sometimes when I am alone at night, I swear I hear soft thuds beneath my bed. The sound of someone shifting, waiting, biding their time. I remind myself I no longer own that bed, that it is gone, destroyed, but the sound persists, faint, steady. I tell myself it is just the pipes, just my heart beating too hard in my ears. But deep down, I know the truth. He came with the bed. And maybe, just maybe, he came with me too. I adopted her a week ago, a quiet, gentle dog with soft brown eyes and a coat that felt like worn velvet. The shelter had named her Daisy, but I started calling her Luna. It seemed to fit. She was calm, watchful, and had a way of moving that reminded me of moonlight slipping through clouds. The first few days were uneventful. She followed me from room to room, always at a respectful distance. She didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't chew on furniture. She ate her meals slowly, as if savoring each bite, and slept curled up at the foot of my bed. I began to think I had lucked out, that maybe this was the start of something good. Then, on the 7th night, everything changed. It was around midnight. I was in the living room reading a book when Luna stood up abruptly. Her ears perked, and she stared down the hallway toward the closet. At first, I thought she had heard something outside a car door, perhaps, or a raccoon rummaging through trash. But then she started to growl. It was a low, rumbling sound, one I hadn't heard from her before. Her body tensed, muscles coiled like springs, and her eyes never left the closet door. The growl grew louder, more insistent, and then she began to bark. Not the playful bark of a dog wanting attention, but a sharp, frantic barking that echoed through the apartment. I tried to calm her, speaking softly, reaching out to touch her, but she wouldn't budge. Her focus was absolute, her entire being directed at that door. And then she started to scream. I've never heard a dog make a sound like that. It was a high-pitched, keening wail that sent shivers down my spine. She lunged at the closet door, slamming her head against it with a sickening thud. Again and again, she threw herself at it, each impact more violent than the last. I rushed to her, trying to pull her away, but she was relentless. Blood began to smear the white paint of the door, and I could see a gash forming above her eye. Desperate, I flung the closet door open. There was nothing inside. Just coats, shoes, and a few boxes stacked neatly on the shelf. No intruder, no animal, nothing that could have provoked such a reaction. Luna stopped immediately. She stood there, panting, blood dripping from her forehead, and stared into the empty closet. Then she turned away, walked back to the living room, and lay down on the rug. She hasn't made a sound since. I've taken her to the vet. They stitched up the wound and gave me some painkillers for her. Physically, she's healing, but something in her has changed. She doesn't follow me anymore. She doesn't respond to her name. She just lies there, eyes open, staring at nothing. I've tried everything, treats, toys, gentle coaxing, but it's like she's not there. Like whatever she saw, whatever she experienced, took something from her. I don't know what to do. I've started sleeping with the lights on. I keep the closet door open now, as if to prove to both of us that there's nothing to fear. But sometimes late at night, I catch her glancing toward it, her eyes wide and unblinking. I wonder what she saw. I wonder if it's still there. I wonder if it saw her first. The vet said she was fine. They checked her eyes, her hearing, her blood. Everything came back normal. The head injury wasn't serious, they said. A few stitches, some rest. She'd be back to herself in no time. But they didn't see her lying there, didn't see how quiet she had become. She didn't flinch when they poked around her face. She didn't whimper when they cleaned the wound, just stared past them, through them, like she wasn't fully in the room anymore. I brought her home and laid a blanket out near the heater, trying to make her comfortable. She didn't move. I brought her food in a ceramic bowl, the kind with rubber on the bottom so it wouldn't slide. She didn't touch it. I sat with her on the floor for what felt like hours, hand resting lightly on her side, hoping the contact would do something. But she didn't lean into it. She didn't pull away either. Just lay there, still breathing, still blinking, but blank. By the next day, she still hadn't barked, not even once. I tried to keep things normal. I worked from home that day, answered emails, sat on video calls, even made myself lunch like usual. Every so often I glanced over at her, half expecting her to be gone or to be standing in front of the closet again, but she never moved. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's not restful or calm. It presses in on you, makes every little sound feel exaggerated. The soft tick of the thermostat, the wind brushing against the windows, the creak of wood settling in the walls, none of it loud, but all of it felt too sharp, like something was just under the surface, waiting. Around 2 a.m, I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The closet door was open, still nothing inside, just the same jackets, the same shoes. I reached out and closed it slowly. Not sure why. Maybe part of me thought she'd respond, that the act of closing it would snap her out of whatever this was. Nothing happened. When I turned around, she was sitting up. She hadn't made a sound. I hadn't heard her pause, but she was there, just behind me, watching me. I knelt down, spoke her name quietly. Still no response. Her head was tilted slightly, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I tried to walk her. She wouldn't move past the front step. I had to carry her back inside. I called the vet again. They said it might be psychological. That shelter dogs sometimes carry trauma you won't see for weeks. That maybe something had triggered an old fear. But they didn't explain the barking, the screaming, the blood. They didn't explain the way she was watching the closet, or how she wouldn't even eat. That night, I moved her bed to my room. I didn't want her alone, and truthfully, I didn't want to be alone either. I left the closet door open again. I didn't trust it shut. At around 4 a.m, I heard something. Not barking, not scratching. A thud. I sat up immediately. She was no longer in her bed. I walked out into the hallway. The closet door was wide open. She was standing in front of it, her head turned toward the inside, not moving, just staring. I called her name, no reaction. I flipped on the hallway light and stepped closer. There was blood on the floor again, a small smear, just a few inches wide leading up to the closet. I checked her head. The stitches were intact, no new wound, but the blood was fresh, still glossy in the light. There was nothing inside the closet. I checked every inch, pulled out the coats, opened every box, moved my shoes, just wood and dust and old receipts. Still, she wouldn't move. I picked her up, brought her back to my room, and closed the door. She lay back down, head resting on her paws, and stared at the wall. I didn't sleep. The next day I put a chair in front of the closet door. It wasn't locked, just shut, but the chair made me feel like I was doing something, like I had control over the situation, like I was keeping something out. or in. The blood was gone in the morning, not dried, not smeared, gone, like it had never been there. I don't know what's happening. I've started leaving my lights on again. I've started checking every window before bed, even though I know this isn't coming from outside. It's in the house. And I don't mean that in some dramatic way. I mean it in a practical, grounded way. Whatever this is, it's not about ghosts or demons. It's about something real, something that's here. Something she knows and I don't. She hasn't barked in 5 days. And now, when I walk past the closet, I find myself holding my breath, just in case it hears me. I kept waiting for her to come back to herself. I thought maybe one day I'd wake up and she'd be sitting by the door again, tail flicking, ears perked up, waiting to be let out. I imagined hearing her soft little huff she used to make when she wanted a treat, but she never did. Every day was the same. She lay near the radiator or under the table, silent and still, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. By the end of the week, I was avoiding the hallway. I kept all the lights on in the main room, and even moved my coffee and breakfast into the living room. I pretended I was just mixing things up, but really I didn't want to walk past that door again, even with the chair in front of it, even knowing it was just a closet. Something about that space felt wrong now. I tried to tell myself it was all stress, that maybe I'd taken on too much lately. Work had been rough. Moving into a new place had me constantly on edge. Maybe I was just feeding off her behavior. Or maybe she was feeding off mine. It became this endless loop. She was tense, so I was tense, and the more I tried to fix it, the worse it got. I told a friend about it. I didn't go into all the details. I didn't talk about the screaming, or the blood, or the closet. I just said she had changed, suddenly, and that I was worried. He suggested a behaviorist, said it might be trauma from her previous home. That made sense, but something about it still didn't feel right. I felt like I was lying just by agreeing. The behaviorist came on a Friday afternoon. She was kind, calm, gentle with her words and her movements. She sat down near Luna, spoke in soft tones, and didn't force contact. She spent about an hour in the apartment, asking questions about the adoption, the layout of the place, the routines we had developed. She wrote things down in a small notebook. At the end, she stood up and looked toward the hallway. "She's avoiding that door," she said. "Not a question, just a statement." I nodded. "Yeah, that's when it started. She was barking at it. Then she hurt herself." She didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there, staring at the closed door. "Do you keep anything in there she might have reacted to?" she asked. I told her it was just coats, shoes, boxes. No cleaning supplies, no chemicals, nothing with a strong smell. I shook my head. Nothing like that. She walked over, gently moved the chair, and opened the door. We both stared inside. It looked exactly the way it always had, dim, a little dusty, nothing out of place. She stepped in and looked around, then reached up and pulled the chain for the overhead bulb. It flickered on. A weak yellow light filled the small space. She crouched down, ran her fingers along the baseboards, then stood and looked at the ceiling. When she came back out, she closed the door carefully and turned to me. "She's scared of that space," she said. "I don't know why, But something happened there, something that set her off. I asked her if she thought it could be a scent, or maybe a sound. Dogs hear things we can't. That's what everyone says. Could be, she said, but if it was just a sound, she'd have gone back to normal by now. This looks more like memory. Something triggered her, and she's stuck in it. Stuck? She nodded. It happens, especially in dogs that have been through trauma. It's like a switch flips, and they can't switch back. They're frozen. Can I fix it? Maybe, but not by forcing it. You'll have to let her lead. I didn't know what to do with that. Let her lead where? After she left, I sat on the floor next to Luna again. I kept hoping maybe she'd snap out of it. Maybe just hearing a new voice had jolted something loose. But she didn't move, didn't blink. She just watched the shadows shifting on the floor, like they meant something I couldn't understand. That night I left the closet door open again. I sat on the couch until late, lights off, just waiting to see what she would do. Nothing happened. But just before I turned in, I noticed something strange. One of the coats inside the closet had moved. It was swaying slightly, just a few inches, like it had been touched. There was no draft, no windows open. I got up, heart pounding, and slowly walked down the hallway. I stopped in front of the open closet and stared inside. The coat was still now. I reached out and touched it. It was cold. Colder than everything else in the closet. I backed away and closed the door again. The next morning, Luna was gone. Not missing, just not in the same place. She had moved to the hallway. She was sitting directly across from the closet. Not facing it, not watching it. Just sitting, like she was waiting. I stood there for a while, just watching her. She didn't react to my presence. She wasn't trembling or growling or doing anything dramatic, just sitting, calm, focused on something I couldn't see. I called her name softly. Nothing. I reached down and gently touched her back. She blinked, but didn't look at me. Her whole posture was stiff, not tense exactly, but rigid, alert in a way that made my stomach turn. Like she was waiting for something she already knew would happen, something she had seen before. The behaviorist said to let her lead, so I didn't pull her away. I just sat down next to her, legs crossed on the hallway floor. We stayed like that for maybe half an hour. I kept trying to read her expression, but dogs don't give away much unless they want to. Her ears stayed forward. Her eyes never shifted. Every few minutes, she would breathe out hard through her nose like a sigh, like she was steadying herself. Eventually, I got up. I left the closet door closed and walked into the kitchen, made coffee, tried to act normal. I needed something to ground me. Even just the routine of boiling water and pouring it over the grounds helped. When I looked back down the hallway, she was still there. I don't know what I expected. For her to snap out of it, for something to lunge out of the closet and explain everything. Instead, the day passed slowly. I worked on my laptop from the kitchen table, answering emails, half listening to online meetings. Occasionally I'd glance at the hallway and see her still sitting, still watching. She didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't lay down. It started getting dark around 5. The apartment has these long windows that stretch from the floor up to the ceiling, and the light fades fast once the sun starts dropping behind the buildings. By the time I thought to turn on the lights, the hallway was already almost completely shadowed. She was still there. I flipped the switch. Light filled the hallway. She didn't move. Something about that unsettled me more than anything else. The way she stayed rooted in that one exact position, like she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. Like some invisible line had been drawn across the floor, and she wasn't allowed to cross it. I tried coaxing her back into the living room, offered a treat. Nothing. Just that same blank focus. At some point I started feeling like maybe this was more than trauma. Or if it was trauma, it wasn't hers. I kept thinking about the coats in the closet, the cold fabric. The way that one jacket swayed slightly on its hanger. Maybe it was air currents. Maybe it was just the weight of memory playing tricks. But the room didn't feel right anymore. Around midnight, I decided to open the door again. I stood in front of it for a long time. Luna didn't move. Her breathing was slower than usual. I reached for the handle and paused. I felt something. Not physical, not even emotional really. More like a shift, like the air itself had changed. I opened the door. The light was still on inside. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast shadows in sharp angles. I stepped in slowly, checking every inch again. Moved the coats, opened the boxes. Felt along the walls and under the shelves. Nothing. But the cold was stronger this time, like walking into a space that hadn't been warmed in years. I looked up and saw that the ceiling panel, the one that covers the crawl space, had shifted slightly, just a crack, barely noticeable. I grabbed the step stool from the kitchen and climbed up. There was no ladder, just a panel that slid sideways. I pushed it open and pointed my phone light into the crawl space. Dust, cobwebs, a few old wires. And something else. A single dog collar. Not Luna's. This one was older. Leather, cracked, faded red. I reached up and pulled it down carefully. The tag was rusted, but I could still make out the name. Juno. I stared at it for a long time. I had never seen that name before. I checked with the shelter records. They had nothing about a dog named Juno in her file. No history of previous owners. Nothing to suggest she had been in a house like this before. But shelters can be messy. Paperwork gets lost. Dogs get renamed. Still, it felt like something important. I brought the collar into the living room and set it on the table. Luna hadn't followed. She stayed in the hallway, watching, unblinking. I thought about calling someone, maybe the behaviorist, maybe someone from the shelter, but what would I say? That my dog found something I didn't know was hidden? That she reacted to a name I had never spoken? I sat on the couch, just watching her. I said the name out loud once, softly. Juno. Luna's ears twitched. Not much, just the smallest flicker. I said it again. She blinked. Her gaze moved slightly, not to me, but to the space just to my left, as if something had shifted, as if something had heard. She didn't bark, didn't growl. She just got up, turned, and slowly walked back toward her bed, lay down, closed her eyes. And for the first time in days, I heard her sigh, a real one. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway instead, back against the wall, watching the closet, watching the dark. trying to remember if I had ever heard that name before. I didn't say the name again the next morning. I was afraid to. Not because I thought something would leap out of the closet or that Luna would start screaming again, but because I didn't know what the word meant to her. I didn't want to break whatever delicate thread had formed between her and that moment last night when she finally moved, finally blinked, finally lay down like something had passed. She still wasn't herself, but something had shifted. She followed me to the kitchen in the morning, slowly, cautiously, but she followed. She didn't touch her food, but she sat nearby while I ate toast and stared at the dog collar on the table, the cracked leather, the faded red, the rusted metal tag. I'd put it on a paper towel to keep it from sticking to the wood. It looked like it had been up there for years. I checked the crawl space again. No other items, no markings, just dust and insulation and silence. Whatever this collar was, whoever Juno was, it was the only thing someone left behind. I didn't know what to do with that. There was no obvious message, no backstory, no context, just a name and a feeling. I tried looking it up, just in case. Searched Juno and my address. Juno and the neighborhood. Nothing specific. Too many false positives. Mostly mythology pages and dog name lists. It didn't help. So I sat with it, kept the collar on the table like an object in a quiet museum. Luna would glance at it sometimes, but never approached. She never sniffed it, never barked. Just noticed it the way you notice a shadow that shouldn't be there. That afternoon I called the shelter. I didn't say much, just asked if there was any chance Luna had been picked up near my address before. I tried to sound casual, like I was just curious about her background. The woman on the phone said she'd check and get back to me. I could hear her clicking through files, then typing, then a long pause. She was found near your street, she said. Actually, just a block over. Brought in by animal control 3 months ago. No collar, no microchip. Any note on her behavior? I asked. When she came in? Another pause. It just says, withdrawn, underweight, fearful of closets. I stopped breathing for a second. Sorry, she said. That sounds odd, but sometimes intake volunteers write the environment they found them in. It could mean she was hiding in a closet when they picked her up, or that she avoided them. I'm not sure. I thanked her and hung up. Luna had been found near here, near this building. She had been hiding, or hiding from something. And now, months later, she was back, in the same hallway, in front of the same closet. Was it possible she had lived here before? That Juno was her old name. I tried saying it again that night, just once. Juno, I whispered. She didn't look at me this time. But she did get up, walked slowly to the closet, sat down in front of it, not tense, not frozen, just quiet. I stayed a few feet back, heart thudding, trying not to spook her. She turned her head slightly, like she was listening, not to me, to the closet. I crouched beside her. The air felt cold again. Not freezing, just a few degrees lower than the rest of the apartment, like something forgotten, left in a closed room for too long. I didn't open the door. She didn't bark. We just sat. Eventually I moved to the living room, brought her blanket over, and folded it neatly in the hallway. She laid down on it, still facing the door. I slept on the couch. When I woke up, she was back in the kitchen, curled under the table. I almost didn't believe it at first. It was like the old her. Not completely, but close. Her eyes followed me as I walked by. Her ears perked up when I filled her bowl. She didn't eat, but she watched. That was enough. Later that afternoon, I got a knock at the door. A woman stood outside, older, maybe in her late 60s, wind-chapped face, coat zipped high. She looked nervous, like she had debated coming here and was still second-guessing herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is going to sound strange, but did you adopt a dog recently?" I hesitated, then nodded. Luna stood behind me, not barking, just watching. The woman looked past me, then down at the floor. I think that might have been my neighbor's dog, a few months ago. She introduced herself, her name was Eileen, and said she used to live 2 floors up. Said there had been a woman in the unit across the hall who had a small brown dog. Quiet, well-behaved, scared of loud noises. She said the woman left suddenly, in the middle of the night, no explanation. Just packed a few things and vanished. They found the dog alone, she said, in the hallway closet. That part stopped me cold. She didn't know the dog's name. She never asked. But she remembered the woman once saying something about Juno, thought it was a friend at first, later realized it might have been the dog's name. I asked if she knew why the woman left. She shook her head. She was quiet, kept to herself, but she was scared of something. I could feel it. We stood in the doorway for another minute, not saying anything, just letting the cold air drift in around us. Finally she said, "I saw your light on last night. Thought maybe, never mind." She left without finishing the thought. I closed the door, went back to the table, looked at the collar again. The dog who had been left behind, found in the closet, terrified, with no name anyone remembered. Now back in the same building, in front of the same door, and suddenly, I was more sure than ever. Juno was her name. After the woman left, I stood in the hallway for a while, watching the light shift across the floorboards. It was late afternoon again, that quiet part of the day when everything starts to feel a little hollow. Luna Juno was lying under the kitchen table, her head resting on her front paws, eyes half closed. There was something calmer about her now. She still wasn't quite the same, but whatever had been holding her in that frozen place seemed to have let go, just a little. I walked back to the closet, no chair in front of it this time, no resistance in my chest, just the door and the knob and whatever silence lived behind it. I opened it slowly. Inside, everything looked the same. Coats, shoes, boxes. The bulb above still buzzed softly, casting that same weak yellow light over the shelves. I reached up and touched the ceiling panel again, slid it aside. I didn't go back up. I didn't need to. I had seen enough. Instead, I pulled out the boxes, one by one, and opened them on the hallway floor. They were full of old papers, manuals, receipts, a few photos of the previous tenants that must have been left behind. I flipped through them without much purpose, half looking, half waiting. Most of it was junk. In the last box, there was a small notebook. It was thin and soft-covered, the kind you'd pick up from a gas station. Inside were a few pages of cramped handwriting, mostly grocery lists. a couple of notes about bills. One line near the back caught my eye. Juno scratched again last night. Still won't go near the closet. Tried treats. No change. That was it. Just a single line in a notebook no one had seen in years. I closed it and sat down on the floor with it in my lap. I didn't feel scared, just tired, like I had walked in circles long enough that the edges of the story had finally begun to smooth out. No big reveal. No hidden door behind the coats, just traces, scattered pieces that all pointed to the same thing. She had been here before. She had been afraid. And now somehow she was back. Maybe by accident, maybe not. I put everything back in the boxes. I left the collar on the table, and I closed the closet door gently, like I was saying goodbye to something I didn't fully understand. That night, Luna came into my room on her own, first time since the incident. She didn't curl up on the rug at the foot of the bed. Instead, she rested her head against the side of the mattress. I reached down and let my fingers rest against the soft fur on her neck. She closed her eyes. For a long time I didn't move. I didn't sleep either. Not because I was afraid, but because I felt like I was witnessing something that didn't need to be interrupted. There was a quiet between us now that felt different than the silence from before. Not absence, not fear, just space, something lived in. In the morning, she ate, not much, but enough. Then she walked over to the closet and sat, not frozen, just still. She sniffed the edge of the door, then turned away and walked back to the kitchen like it had never held power over her at all. I knew then that whatever this had been, it was ending. Not because I solved anything, not because I had proof, but because the person who had been left behind, dog or woman or both, had finally been noticed, finally heard. I took the collar outside that afternoon, not far, just to a park a few blocks away. There was a cluster of trees along the back edge of the lot. I found a quiet spot, dug a small hole beneath one of the oldest ones, and placed the collar there, wrapped in the soft towel I had used when Luna first came home from the vet. I didn't say anything. I just covered it gently and sat there with my hands in the dirt. A breeze passed through the branches above me, and I let it move over my face, slow and cool and steady. When I got home, Luna was waiting by the door. She wagged her tail once. It was the first time I'd seen her do that. Now, weeks later, she still won't go near the closet. But she doesn't stare at it anymore, doesn't sit in front of it like she's waiting for something to appear. She just walks past it. Sleeps in the sun, eats her food, noses my leg when she wants attention. Some days, I still catch myself watching that door. I wonder if there's still something behind it. Not a ghost, not a shadow, just memory, imprint. Whatever it is that lingers when something important happens in a place and no one's left to acknowledge it. But then Luna looks at me with those calm, steady eyes, and I remember that it's over. It ended when I said her name, when I let it matter, when I listened. It was a regular evening in Rochester, the kind that feels calm and safe in a way you don't always notice until something shakes it up. I had been home for a few hours after work, just winding down with some late-night TV. The house was quiet except for the soft buzz of the television and the occasional distant sound of cars driving by on the street outside. The windows were open just a crack, letting in the cool night air that carried a faint scent of damp pavement and cut grass. It was one of those moments where everything seems perfectly still, and you don't expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. But then I noticed her. At first, she was just a silhouette under the street lamp, a woman slowly walking down the sidewalk. I thought maybe she was just taking a walk or looking for something. It was late, but the neighborhood was usually pretty safe, so I didn't think twice about it. But then I saw what she did next, and it pulled me right out of my relaxed state. She stopped at the first house on the block and reached out her hand. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and almost too gentle. She tried the doorknob. Just a twist, a soft test, nothing aggressive or forceful. Then she moved on to the next house, repeating the same thing. Door after door, she stopped and tested each knob quietly and patiently. It wasn't frantic or panicked. It was methodical, almost calm. It was the kind of behavior that would be harmless if it were someone who lived there and had just forgotten their keys. But this woman clearly didn't belong here. She was unfamiliar to the neighborhood, and no one I knew had ever seen her before. I couldn't stop watching. She made her way down the street, stopping at every house, her hand moving slowly over the cold metal of each doorknob. There was something deeply unsettling about the way she did it, like she expected the doors to open just for her, as if she had a right to enter. It was as if she was searching for something or someone. She never knocked or called out. She didn't peer in the windows or try the windows themselves, just the doorknobs. The image stuck with me, this quiet figure testing each entryway with a calmness that didn't fit the situation. When she finally reached my house, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. She stood there for what seemed like an eternity, not moving, just staring at the door as if it held some secret she was waiting to uncover. Then she slowly raised her hand and reached for my doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I call out to her? Should I call the police? Part of me wanted to believe she was harmless, maybe lost or confused, but another part screamed at me to be careful. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, keeping the line open while I whispered a description of the woman and what I was seeing. The minutes stretched on as she lingered at my door, her fingers brushing the cold metal repeatedly. At one point, she stepped back onto the sidewalk and looked around, her expression hard to read, but her eyes glinting in the streetlight. I thought maybe she was going to leave, but then she came back, almost as if drawn magnetically to my front door. I stayed glued to the window, phone in hand, watching her every move. The police said they would send someone right away, but it took nearly 45 minutes for officers to arrive. I don't know if it was just the nature of the call or the time of night, but those minutes felt like hours. During that time, the woman paced the sidewalk in front of my house, muttering quietly. I couldn't catch the words at first, but then I heard her whisper clearly, "Let me in. I'm already home." The words froze me. There was something in her voice that wasn't quite right. Soft but insistent, like a broken plea or a fractured memory. When the police finally got there, they approached her cautiously. She didn't resist or speak to them, just stared blankly, barefoot and disheveled. They asked for identification, but she had none. No ID, no wallet, no phone. Just her pale, worn clothes and that haunting look in her eyes. They took her away quietly, but no one ever came forward to claim her or explain who she was. The whole incident shook me. The neighborhood felt different after that night, as if the normal calm had been pierced by something unknown and unwelcome. My neighbors and I talked about it for weeks, trying to make sense of what we had seen. Some thought she might have been mentally ill or disoriented. Others whispered darker theories, a drugged or kidnapped person left to wander, or something even more unsettling that no one wanted to admit. The doorbell camera on my neighbor's house recorded the entire event. Watching the footage later, the image of the woman standing outside my door, whispering those chilling words, felt like a message from somewhere else. I still can't explain who she was or what she wanted, but her presence left an impression that refuses to fade. Even now, when I walk down my street at night, I remember that woman, the way she moved slowly, methodically, as if the houses were pieces of a puzzle she was trying to solve. It's a reminder that sometimes, even in the places we think we know best, there are stories we never hear, shadows we never see, and mysteries that no one wants to explain. The night the police finally arrived, the tension in the air was thick and almost unbearable. I had been watching from my window, the woman still lingering near my front door, her movements slow and deliberate, whispering to herself. I could tell she was unsettled, as if caught between somewhere she didn't fully understand and a place she desperately wanted to be. When the flashing lights of the squad cars pulled up, I felt a rush of relief mixed with curiosity and something else I could not quite name. What would happen next? Who was she? And why had she been here for so long? The officers moved cautiously as they approached her. She didn't resist, but looked at them with eyes that held a strange emptiness and pain. They asked if she had any identification, or if she could tell them who she was. She only whispered again, "I'm already home," in the same soft, haunting voice I had heard for nearly an hour. The officers exchanged glances, unsure what to do. One radioed for backup while the other tried to engage her more gently. I watched, frozen, as she was carefully escorted to the patrol car, still barefoot, still without a word beyond those chilling few. That night, my neighbors and I gathered outside, drawn by the flashing lights and the eerie silence that followed. People exchanged stories and theories, none of which made the situation feel any less strange or unsettling. Some suggested she might be mentally ill, others whispered about drugs or human trafficking. The police admitted they did not have immediate answers, but they promised to investigate. Still, no one could say where she had come from or why she had chosen this street and these doors. The next few days brought a strange mix of unease and curiosity. The police didn't release much information, and my neighbors grew quieter, almost reluctant to talk about what had happened. It was as if the woman's presence had stirred something uncomfortable, something people wanted to forget. But for me, the memory stayed vivid, the way she moved, the way she whispered, and especially the words she repeated, "Let me in, I'm already home." I began to think about those words more deeply. What did she mean? How could someone be standing outside my door, asking to be let in, while claiming they were already home? It sounded like a plea, but also like a confession, a fragmented expression of someone trapped in a reality that didn't quite fit. I couldn't shake the feeling that her story was tied to something larger, something I was only glimpsing. The footage from my neighbor's doorbell camera became a point of focus. Watching the video again and again, I noticed small details I had missed the first time, the way her eyes darted nervously, the way her hands trembled when she reached for the doorknob. She looked exhausted and scared, a ghost of someone who had been through something terrible. And yet, there was something else too, a strange kind of calm in the way she moved, as if she had given up fighting and surrendered to whatever fate had brought her here. I started talking to people in the neighborhood, hoping to find someone who might recognize her or offer a clue. No one did. No missing person reports matched her description. No one had seen her before that night. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere, and just as mysteriously, she vanished after the police took her away. It felt like a story without an ending, a mystery that was never meant to be solved. The whole event left me thinking about the fragility of safety and the thin line between familiarity and fear. I had always felt comfortable in my neighborhood, a place where neighbors waved hello and looked out for each other. But that night reminded me how easily that sense of security can be shaken by something unknown. It was a sobering thought, knowing that someone could wander my street, test my door, whisper unsettling words, and disappear without explanation. Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The quiet nights came back, the routine sounds of cars and distant sirens filling the air. But I found myself looking out the window more often, watching for anything unusual. Sometimes I thought I saw a shadow flicker at the edge of the street, or heard a faint whisper carried on the wind. I wondered if the woman had left something behind, a question, a warning, or a cry for help that no one had understood. The experience also made me more aware of how easily people can become invisible in the midst of everyday life. Who was she? What had led her here, barefoot and lost, whispering as if she belonged to a place that wasn't on any map? Was she a victim of circumstance, a person who had slipped through the cracks, or was there something darker that no one dared to say out loud? These questions haunted me, unanswered but persistent. I talked to friends and family about what happened, and while some dismissed it as a weird one-time incident, others shared their own stories of strange encounters and unexplained moments. It became clear that everyone carries fragments of mystery in their lives, pieces that don't fit neatly into the story we tell ourselves. Maybe that's why the woman's presence stayed with me, because she represented the unknown parts of life, the things we see but cannot fully grasp. The police never released details about what happened to her after they took her away. I found out she was taken to a local hospital for evaluation, but beyond that, the trail went cold. No one claimed her, no reports matched her description, and she never returned. It was like she had been a ghost walking the streets, a reminder that sometimes people disappear not just physically, but from all the systems designed to keep us safe. The night she came to my door changed the way I see the world. It made me realize how fragile our sense of home and safety can be, and how important it is to notice the people around us, those who might be struggling silently, those who might be reaching out in ways we don't immediately understand. It reminded me that sometimes a whisper and a gentle touch on a doorknob can be a cry for help, a plea to be seen and heard. Since then, I have tried to be more aware, more compassionate. I check on neighbors more often, listen to the stories people share, and try to remember that everyone has a story, even if it's hidden behind a quiet knock or a whispered word. The woman who walked my street that night may never have found her way, but her presence left a mark, a reminder that sometimes the most important thing we can do is pay attention. And though the street has returned to its usual calm, I still feel the weight of that night. It lingers in the quiet moments when the world seems still, in the spaces between the sounds of the city and in the memories that don't fade. The woman who tried every door on my street may have vanished, but the questions she raised remain, echoing like soft footsteps in the night. The days after the incident unfolded in a strange sort of haze for me. Life kept moving the usual errands, work, and quiet nights, but the memory of that woman, her quiet testing of every doorknob on my street, lingered like a shadow I could not shake. It was as if the night had opened a door, not just physically, but in my mind, revealing how fragile the world could be beneath its familiar surface. I found myself watching the street from my window more often, looking for signs of anything out of the ordinary. But the neighborhood had settled back into its peaceful rhythm, with nothing unusual except the echo of unanswered questions. I kept replaying the moment she stood outside my door, whispering those haunting words, "Let me in, I'm already home." There was a weight to them that I could not quite understand. It felt like a desperate plea wrapped in a riddle, a message from someone trapped between worlds or realities. Was she truly lost, or was she somewhere else entirely, caught in a state of confusion or despair? The phrase made me think of people who lose their sense of belonging, those who wander without a place to call their own. It struck a chord deep inside me. Neighbors who had heard about the incident were hesitant to talk much. It was one of those things people didn't know how to process or explain. Some suggested she might have been mentally ill, wandering in a confused state. Others worried about the possibility of something darker, abduction, drug abuse, or a crime hidden beneath the surface of normal life. No one had clear answers, and that ambiguity made the story stick around in the community's collective mind. It became a shared mystery that no one quite dared to solve. The local police provided little information beyond the initial response. They confirmed that the woman had been taken for medical evaluation but refused to disclose her condition or what had happened afterward. I tried following up, hoping to learn more or offer help if she was still out there somewhere, but the trail went cold. It was as if she had slipped through the cracks, disappearing not just from my street, but from all the systems meant to protect her. That thought unsettled me more than anything else, the idea that someone so close could vanish without a trace or explanation. I started thinking about the people we overlook every day, the ones who pass by quietly, who don't fit neatly into our comfortable routines. What had brought her here? Was she trying to get back to a place she once knew, or was she searching for a new sense of belonging? The fact that she tested so many doors made me wonder if she was desperate, looking for a refuge or a connection. That kind of loneliness, that kind of desperation, is hard to imagine but impossible to ignore once you've witnessed it. That experience changed the way I interact with my neighbors and my community. I became more attentive, more willing to listen to the small signs that something might be wrong. I realized that sometimes the quiet moments, the hesitation in a smile, the trembling hands, the whispered words, are cries for help that go unnoticed. The woman on my street reminded me that being seen and heard can make all the difference. I spoke with a few local outreach workers and mental health advocates, hoping to understand what might have happened and how people in vulnerable situations could be better supported. They told me stories of people who fall through the cracks, those struggling with mental illness, addiction, or trauma who sometimes disappear into the shadows. Many of them wander, confused and frightened, searching for safety in places that offer none. It was heartbreaking, but also enlightening to learn how complex and fragile the systems are that are supposed to catch them. At the same time, the story of that night took on a life of its own in the neighborhood. It was shared quietly at block parties, mentioned in hushed tones at coffee shops, and passed on as a cautionary tale about staying aware. But beyond that, it also became a reminder of compassion and vigilance. We don't always know what people are facing, and sometimes all it takes is a moment of kindness or attention to make a difference. I found myself thinking a lot about the woman's whisper, "I'm already home." Those words haunted me because they seemed to hint at a deeper truth. That sometimes people feel lost not just in place but in identity and belonging. They wander through life, testing doors and hoping to find a space where they are accepted, where they can feel safe and at peace. That phrase became a symbol of that struggle, a quiet reminder of how important it is to see people fully and offer them sanctuary in whatever way we can. The incident also raised questions about safety and community. How do we protect our neighborhoods without turning away those who need help? How do we balance vigilance with compassion? The woman's quiet presence forced me to grapple with these difficult questions, to think beyond the surface and consider the unseen struggles that might be happening just steps from my front door. In the months since, I've made small changes in my daily life. I check in with neighbors more often, especially those who live alone or might be vulnerable. I volunteer with local support groups when I can, trying to be part of the solution rather than just a bystander. The memory of that night drives me to be more present, more engaged, and more empathetic. Despite the lack of answers, the experience has given me a deeper understanding of human fragility and resilience. It showed me how thin the line can be between safety and vulnerability, belonging and isolation. The woman who walked my street that night may have disappeared from view, but her story remains a powerful reminder of the unseen lives around us. At times, I still catch myself watching the street, half expecting to see her figure return, testing doors quietly under the street lamp. The image is seared into my memory, the gentle touch on cold metal, the whispered plea, the barefoot woman who seemed both lost and strangely at home. It is a story I carry with me, one that has shaped the way I see the world and the people in it. The night she came to my door was more than an odd event. It was a call to pay attention, to listen to the quiet voices, and to remember that safety and home mean more than locks and walls. They mean connection, understanding, and compassion. And though the woman is gone, the questions she left behind still echo softly down the street, reminding me that sometimes the most important doors to open are the ones in our hearts. The nights after the woman disappeared from my street felt different, quieter, but with an undercurrent of something unresolved. I kept thinking about her, the way she moved slowly from door to door, her gentle touch on the cold doorknobs, and the haunting whisper that slipped through the darkness, "Let me in. I'm already home." Those words seemed to hang in the air, refusing to fade no matter how hard I tried to push them away. They became a puzzle I couldn't stop trying to solve, a mystery wrapped in sadness and confusion. Life went on around me, the rhythms of work, family, and daily routines pulling me forward. But every time I walked outside or looked out the window at the familiar street, I felt her presence again. It was as if the neighborhood had absorbed her story, carrying it quietly beneath the surface like a secret that everyone sensed, but no one wanted to speak aloud. The houses, The street lamps, the cracked sidewalks, all seemed to remember that strange night when a barefoot woman tested every door, searching for a place she could call home. I found myself drawn to learning more about the challenges people like her face. I reached out to local organizations that worked with homeless individuals, people struggling with mental health issues, and those trying to rebuild their lives after trauma. Their stories were often heartbreaking, filled with moments of kindness and cruelty, hope and despair. It became clear to me that the woman who walked my street might have been someone caught in one of those painful stories, someone whose voice was muffled by circumstance, who wandered without a clear path or support. The more I learned, the more I realized how fragile the systems designed to protect vulnerable people really are. Sometimes all it takes is a few moments of attention or a simple act of kindness to change a life. I wondered if that woman had encountered any of those moments before she came to my street, or if she had slipped through unnoticed, left to wander alone in the cold night. I began to think about what it means to be seen and heard. How often do we walk past people who are struggling, wrapped in their own pain or confusion, without noticing? How many whispers go unheard? The woman's quiet plea to be let in struck me as both a literal request and a metaphor for human connection, the need to be accepted, to belong, and to find safety in a world that often feels unwelcoming. The police investigation seemed to stall, and no further information came to light. The woman was never identified or located after that night. It was as if she had been a shadow passing through, touching the edges of our lives and then disappearing without explanation. That unresolved ending left a lingering discomfort, a sense that the story was unfinished. I talked more with neighbors, sharing what little I knew and listening to their feelings about the event. Many expressed relief that the woman was gone, but others felt unsettled by the mystery. The experience opened up conversations about community, safety, and the responsibility we all share to look out for one another. It was a difficult but necessary dialogue, one that challenged assumptions and encouraged empathy. In my own home, I became more vigilant. I started locking doors and windows carefully, but I also made a point to greet neighbors and check in with those who lived alone. Small gestures, but they felt important in a way I hadn't realized before. The memory of that woman on my doorstep reminded me that behind every door is a story, and sometimes that story includes struggle, loss, and a search for belonging. I thought about the phrase she whispered again and again, "I'm already home." It was paradoxical and poignant, suggesting a person caught between worlds or identities. Perhaps she had lost her place in the world, or maybe she was carrying invisible wounds that made it hard to feel safe anywhere. The words felt like a call for recognition, a cry to be accepted as part of something, even when everything else felt lost. The event also deepened my understanding of fear and compassion. It's easy to fear the unknown, to close doors and turn away from what we don't understand. But that night reminded me that fear is often rooted in misunderstanding, and that compassion requires effort and courage. It challenged me to be more open, more willing to see beyond appearances and respond with kindness. As time passed, the street returned to its usual calm, but the echoes of that night stayed with me. I still find myself glancing toward the door, wondering what might have happened if I had opened it, if someone had spoken to her, or if she had found the refuge she was looking for. Those thoughts are bittersweet, filled with regret, but also hope that the experience might inspire others to pay attention to the quiet signs around them. The woman who walked my street barefoot, whispering to doors and searching for a place to belong, became more than a moment of fear or confusion. She became a symbol of the hidden struggles many face, a reminder of the power of presence and the importance of community. Her story, though unresolved, taught me about vulnerability and strength, about the unseen battles fought every day. Even now, when the night is still and the world seems paused, I hear the soft echo of footsteps in my mind, the gentle testing of a doorknob, the whispered words that ask for entry, and the silent hope that someone will listen. It is a haunting, yes, but also a call to wakefulness, a reminder that home is not just a place, but a feeling we give to each other through care, understanding, and connection. In the end, the woman who tried every door on my street left a mark not just on the neighborhood, but on my heart. Her presence challenged me to see more deeply, to act with greater compassion, and to remember that sometimes the most important doors we open are those we hold within ourselves. The street remains peaceful, but the story continues, a quiet ripple in the fabric of everyday life that asks us to be kinder, more aware, and more present to those who need it most. The weeks and months following that strange night settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Life carried on, but the memory of the barefoot woman who had wandered down my street, testing every door, lingered like a shadow at the edges of my thoughts. I found myself thinking about her often, wondering about her story, and trying to make sense of what had happened. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this incident had opened my eyes to the fragility of our sense of safety and the complexity of human need. I began to see the world differently, the neighborhoods I walked through, the people I passed by, the stories I heard on the news. All of it felt more interconnected and urgent. It was no longer enough to just go through the motions and assume that everything was fine. I became more aware of the struggles that many people face quietly and invisibly. The woman on my street was a stark reminder that homelessness, mental health issues, and vulnerability are realities that can touch anyone, anywhere. I reached out to local organizations working to help people experiencing homelessness and mental illness. I volunteered some time and donated to causes that supported safe housing and mental health care. Talking with people who dedicated their lives to helping those in need gave me a new perspective on how difficult and complex these issues are. I learned about the many barriers that prevent people from getting the support they deserve: lack of affordable housing, stigma, inadequate health care, and systemic failures that leave people isolated. The story of the woman who whispered, "Let me in, I'm already home," stayed with me. Those words haunted me because they spoke to a deep human truth, the longing for belonging, for a place where we feel safe and accepted. I thought about how many people wander through life feeling disconnected, searching for a home in the literal sense, but also in the emotional and spiritual sense. It made me reflect on my own life, my own connections, and how important it is to nurture a sense of community. As the seasons changed, the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual quiet. The police never found out who she was or where she came from, and the case faded into local rumor and memory. But for me, it was a turning point. I began to see the importance of small acts of kindness, checking in on a neighbor, offering a smile or a listening ear, supporting local shelters. These things felt like building blocks for a stronger, more compassionate community. At the same time, I struggled with the unanswered questions. What had happened to her after the police took her away? Did she find help or slip further into despair? I often wondered if she ever found a place where she truly belonged, or if she remained lost, wandering the streets of some other city or town. The thought was both painful and sobering. I also thought about the way the neighborhood had reacted, the mixture of fear, confusion, and sympathy. It was a reflection of how communities grapple with the unknown and the uncomfortable. People want to feel safe, but safety sometimes means shutting out those who do not fit the norm. The woman's presence challenged those boundaries, forcing us to confront our assumptions and biases. That night changed my understanding of what it means to belong and to be human. It showed me that the boundaries we draw between safe and unsafe, known and unknown, are often fragile and porous. It reminded me that people carry their struggles with them, sometimes invisibly, and that a little awareness can go a long way. In my personal life, I became more intentional about connection. I reached out to old friends, built new relationships, and tried to be more present with those around me. The experience taught me the value of presence, the simple act of being there, listening, and acknowledging someone's existence and pain. Sometimes, when the night is still and quiet, I find myself thinking about the woman who walked my street barefoot. I imagine her standing under the street lamp, testing the doorknobs, whispering those words that seem so full of longing. I wonder if she ever found a door that opened for her, a place she could call home. Her story, though unfinished, became a symbol for me, a reminder that behind every face is a story, behind every door is a life, and that the world is full of people searching for connection, safety, and acceptance. It challenged me to see beyond appearances and to approach the world with more empathy. The neighborhood has moved on, as neighborhoods do. New faces appear, seasons change, and the rhythm of life continues. But the memory of that night remains, a quiet echo that calls me to remember the importance of kindness and the power of community. I often think about how fragile our sense of normalcy is and how quickly it can be disrupted by something unexpected. The woman who tested every door reminded me that safety is not just about locks and fences. It is about the connections we build with each other and the compassion we show to those who are struggling. In the end, the experience was a lesson in humility and humanity. It taught me to be more aware of the unseen struggles that surround us, and to remember that sometimes the most important thing we can do is open our hearts and our doors to those in need. And though the woman who walked my street that night remains a mystery, her presence changed me. It became a part of my story and a call to live with greater kindness, presence, and awareness. After everything that had happened, I spent a long time reflecting on what it all meant. Not just the night the woman walked down my street barefoot, testing every door, but the ripples her presence left behind. It wasn't just an isolated moment of unease. It was a window into something much larger about human vulnerability, belonging, and the fragility of the invisible safety nets we all rely on. I found myself thinking about her often, not as a stranger or a ghostly figure from a cold night, but as a symbol of the countless people who feel lost, disconnected, or desperate to find a place they can call home. In the months following that night, I made a conscious effort to change. I started volunteering with local organizations that work to help the homeless, and those struggling with mental illness. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to turn a disturbing experience into something meaningful. Listening to the stories of the people I met there, I realized that many had faced the same kind of isolation and despair that the woman on my street seemed to embody. Some had families who had given up on them, others had lost everything in a series of bad breaks, and some had never had a safe place to begin with. Hearing these stories deepened my empathy and made the phrase she whispered all the more poignant. "Let me in, I'm already home." It was a cry that went beyond the literal doors she tested that night. It was a yearning for acceptance, safety, and recognition that many people carry quietly inside. It made me question how often we overlook or dismiss those who seem out of place or in distress. How many people are walking around feeling like they have no home, no refuge, no one to turn to? I kept in touch with my neighbors, sharing what I had learned and encouraging conversations about how to support each other better. The neighborhood, once shaken by fear and uncertainty, began to feel more connected. People looked out for one another in small but meaningful ways, checking in on elderly neighbors, sharing information about local resources, and creating informal networks of support. The woman's presence had inadvertently sparked a community awakening, reminding us all of the importance of compassion. The police investigation, while never revealing much about her identity or fate, did lead to increased awareness among local authorities and social services. There was a push to improve outreach and care for vulnerable people, though the challenges were enormous and ongoing. I understood that no single incident could fix the systemic problems, but I hoped that stories like hers could inspire change and motivate people to act. Looking back, I realized that the woman who tested every door was not just a figure of fear or mystery, but a catalyst for reflection and growth. Her silent plea, her quiet persistence, and the unanswered questions she left behind opened my eyes to a world many of us barely see. It was a reminder that home is more than a physical space. It is a feeling, a connection, and sometimes a fragile thread we fight to hold on to. I still walk down my street in the evenings, the same way I always have, but with a deeper awareness. I notice the small things, the flicker of a porch light, the sound of laughter from a nearby window, the neighbor tending their garden. I listen for the whispers of the past and the stories held in the bricks and trees. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I think I hear a soft footstep or a faint whisper carried on the breeze, reminding me that some stories never truly end. The night she came to my door closed a chapter but left an enduring legacy in my life. It taught me about vulnerability, about the unseen struggles around us, and about the power of kindness. It challenged me to be more present, more compassionate, and more willing to open the doors in my heart as well as my home. In the quiet moments before sleep, I find myself grateful for that strange, unsettling night. It forced me to confront fears, to see beyond appearances, and to embrace the messy, beautiful complexity of human life. The woman who tested every door on my street remains a mystery, but she is no longer just a ghostly figure. She is a symbol of hope and a call to action. The neighborhood has healed and moved forward, but the memory of that night still ripples quietly beneath the surface, a reminder that none of us are truly alone. We all carry a need to belong, a hope for safety, and a desire to be seen. Sometimes it takes a stranger's whispered words and bare footsteps to wake us up to those truths. And so, the story ends not with fear or confusion, but with understanding, growth, and a quiet hope for a better future. The woman who wandered my street barefoot, who tested every door and whispered, "I'm already home," may never find the place she was searching for. But her presence changed a community, opened hearts, and left behind a message that still echoes, that kindness and connection can be the keys to any locked door. It was one of those late nights where the city feels like it is already asleep, even though you know there are still people awake somewhere, tucked into neon diners or stumbling home from bars. I had stayed later than planned at a coworker's apartment, and by the time I said goodbye, the streets were nearly empty. I remember how quiet it was when I walked to the bus stop, the kind of quiet that makes every sound stand out more than it should. My footsteps echoed too loudly. The buzz of the street lamp overhead felt almost electric against my ears, and when the bus finally lumbered up the hill and stopped in front of me, the hiss of its brakes made me jump. I climbed on, dropped my fare, and noticed right away how empty it was. Normally at least a few people ride that line, but not that night. Just the driver, sitting stiff in his seat, and one other person, a man. He was already there when I got on, sitting toward the back. Something about him stuck in my head immediately, though I could not have said why. He had taken a seat in the very back row, which I always thought was strange when a bus is nearly empty. Most people spread out, grab a middle row seat, or sit near the front where they can get off faster. But he was right there in the back, hands folded on his knees, posture too straight. I made the mistake of sliding into a seat just a few rows ahead of him. I do not know why I did not sit closer to the front with the driver. Maybe I just did not want to look like I was scared, or maybe I thought nothing of it until it was too late. I sat down, set my bag next to me, and tried to ignore the way the bus groaned as it pulled back onto the road. For the first few minutes, I did not pay much attention. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into long yellow streaks as we passed closed shops and sleeping houses. That was when I heard it, a voice, faint, low, just a few syllables strung together. At first, I thought it was the driver muttering to himself, but the sound was too close, too near my ear. I froze, tilted my head just slightly, and realized it was coming from behind me. The man was whispering. I did not turn around right away. Something in me said not to. It was not a normal kind of whisper, not the sort people make when they are talking on the phone or humming a song. It had a rhythm to it, like someone reciting a prayer under their breath, words tumbling one after another too quickly for me to catch. The hair on my arms prickled, and I pressed myself back into my seat, trying to focus on the passing streetlights outside. The voice stopped suddenly, as if he knew I had noticed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just talking to himself or practicing something, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the whisper had. I could hear the hum of the bus lights, the occasional rattle when we hit a bump, and beneath it, the sense that he was still there, watching me. I kept glancing at the reflection in the dark bus window, hoping to catch even a faint outline of him, but the glare from the overhead lights blurred everything into smudges of gray and yellow. We passed 3 stops. No one got on. The streets outside looked emptier each time we slowed to a crawl at the corner. I remember thinking that I should just move up, sit near the driver, but something in me resisted. I did not want to make it obvious that he had gotten under my skin. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a shift in the air behind me. That subtle sense you get when someone leans closer, when their presence presses in on you even if they do not touch you. His voice came again, not muttering this time, clearer, direct. "Do not get off yet." I jerked in my seat, my throat tightening. My first instinct was to turn around, but I stopped myself halfway. The way he said it, slow, deliberate, like it was not advice but a command, it rooted me in place. Do not get off yet. They are waiting. Every muscle in my body tensed. I wanted to demand who he meant, what he was talking about, but my tongue felt heavy in my mouth. The bus rattled along as if nothing was wrong, the driver oblivious up front. I gripped the edge of the seat in front of me so tightly my knuckles ached. Finally, I forced myself to turn around. The row was empty. No one was there. The back of the bus stretched into shadow, seats unoccupied, floor littered only with scraps of paper and a crushed soda can. My chest tightened. I whipped my head back toward the driver, half ready to shout, but when I glanced out the window instead, the reflection in the glass caught me. A figure was sitting behind me, clear as day, hunched just close enough that his face should have been level with my shoulder. But when I whipped my head back again, the seat was empty. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself I was tired, imagining things, that it was a trick of the reflection, nothing more. But the sound of his voice clung to me, curling around each word like smoke. Do not get off yet. They are waiting. That was when the bus slowed to my stop. The driver flicked on the overhead light, the ding of the signal chiming, and I reached down to grab my bag, my hands trembling. My seat felt like it was burning beneath me. Like if I stayed 1 second longer, I would hear his breath against my ear again. I stood on shaky legs, glanced down the aisle one more time, and told myself that whatever I thought I had heard, whatever I thought I had seen, I was going to step off that bus and leave it behind me. But as I moved toward the front, I could have sworn I felt the faintest brush of fingers against the back of my jacket. The second I stepped off that bus, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But it was not the kind of relief that lasts. It was thin, like stepping from one bad dream into another. The bus doors hissed shut behind me, and I stood there on the sidewalk, staring as the bus pulled away down the empty street. The driver did not look at me, did not even glance in the mirror. For a moment I wanted to flag him down, to say something, but my throat would not work. I just stood there, my bag heavy on my shoulder, the sound of the engine fading until it was gone. The street was too quiet. I live in a neighborhood where there is usually at least some noise at that hour. A car passing, someone walking their dog, the faint thump of music from a block over. That night it was dead silent. I walked quickly, my shoes slapping against the pavement louder than they should have. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure from the bus following me. Every time I looked, the street was empty, but I could not shake the sense that someone was close. By the time I reached my apartment building, my nerves were frayed. I fumbled with the keys at the door, my hands trembling like I had just run a marathon. When I finally made it inside, I leaned against the door and pressed my forehead to the cool wood, breathing hard. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was late, I was tired, and maybe I had imagined the whisper. Maybe there had not been anyone behind me at all. That was the story I repeated as I climbed the stairs and locked myself inside my place. Sleep did not come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every creak of the building making my heart skip. I left the lamp on, something I had not done since I was a kid, afraid of the dark. Every time I started to drift off, I thought I heard a faint sound, the scrape of fabric, the shift of weight against the floorboards. Once, I swore I heard whispering again, just outside my bedroom door. I sat up so fast I nearly got dizzy, but the apartment was silent. When morning finally came, I felt wrung out, like I had not rested at all. Sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds, and I sat on the edge of the bed trying to convince myself to move on with my day. Work would be a distraction. Normalcy would ground me again. That was what I needed, something ordinary to push away the strange. At the office, things felt fine at first. The noise of keyboards clacking, coworkers chatting about weekend plans, the faint smell of burnt coffee drifting from the break room. It was grounding, familiar. But around mid-morning, one of my coworkers stopped by my desk, looking puzzled. "Who was that guy you were talking to when I walked by earlier?" she asked. I blinked at her, confused. "What guy?" She frowned. "Tall guy, pale. You were kind of leaned over, like you were listening to him. I thought maybe he was new here." The blood drained from my face. I had been sitting alone all morning, headphones in, music low enough that I could still work. There had been no one standing behind me. At least, not that I had seen. I forced a laugh and waved her off, saying she must have imagined it, but inside my stomach turned to ice. That night, I checked my bag when I got home. I do not know why, just a sudden compulsion. Maybe I thought I had dropped something, or maybe I just wanted to be sure it was still only my stuff in there. At the bottom of the bag was a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper was blank, completely empty, just a sheet of white torn roughly from a notebook. I sat there staring at it, heart pounding. It should have been nothing, just a piece of paper, but I had not put it there. I was certain of that. Later, around 2 a.m, I woke with my mouth dry and padded to the kitchen for water. I did not bother turning on the lights, just let the glow from the street lamps spill through the window. Halfway across the room I froze. The reflection in the window showed me standing there, but I was not alone. Behind me, just over my shoulder, a tall figure loomed. Pale face, dark eyes, head tilted slightly like he was watching me too closely. I spun so fast I nearly fell. The kitchen was empty. I dropped the glass I had been holding. It shattered against the tile, water spreading across the floor in a thin sheet. My breath came shallow and quick. My heart pounded in my ears. I grabbed the counter to steady myself and forced myself to look back at the window. Only my reflection stared back, alone this time. I cleaned up the mess with shaking hands, then sat in the living room with every light on until dawn. I could not convince myself to sleep. The next day, I told myself again that I was imagining things, that stress and lack of sleep were messing with me. That was until I checked the footage from the bus. The buses on my route had cameras inside, and a friend of mine who worked with the transit system sometimes helped me get copies when I needed them for class projects. I asked him casually if he could pull the feed from that night. He gave me a weird look, but agreed. When I watched it, my blood ran cold. There I was, sitting near the middle of the bus, bag at my side. The driver up front, hands steady on the wheel. The rest of the bus was empty, completely empty. No one sat behind me. No one whispered. No one leaned forward to speak. It was just me. And yet, when I leaned slightly in the video, turning my head as though someone had spoken to me, I saw it, a flicker, a blur of something pale in the seat behind me, just for a frame, maybe less. Too fast to be certain, too quick to capture, but enough to freeze my chest with dread. That night, as I sat on my couch replaying the footage over and over, I heard it again. That same low whisper, curling out from nowhere. Do not get off yet. I leapt to my feet, spun in circles around the apartment, every light blazing, my skin cold with sweat. Nothing was there, but the words hung in the air, heavy and certain, as if whoever had spoken them was still right there with me. By the third night, I had already started to dread the quiet. I used to love silence, especially after a long day at work. But now, it felt like silence was just a stage waiting for something else to step onto it. I kept every light on, my TV playing old sitcom reruns at low volume, and yet I still caught myself pausing in the middle of the room, straining to hear the faintest whisper, a breath, anything that might hint he was still around. Sleep became harder to catch. My body felt heavy, like it craved it, but my mind would not shut down. I would close my eyes and immediately feel the weight of someone leaning over me. It was not sound exactly, not even touch, more like the pressure of being observed. I would snap my eyes open and stare at the ceiling, too afraid to even look at the corners of my room. I told myself that if it was all in my head, then I could prove it wrong. Evidence cuts through paranoia, right? That is what I thought. So the next morning I went out and bought a cheap camera. Not some high-tech setup, just something that could record in the dark and save to a memory card. I placed it in my bedroom, pointed toward my bed, and tried to sleep that night with the comfort of knowing I would have proof one way or the other. When I reviewed the footage the next day, I almost wished I had not. At first it was boring, me tossing and turning, blankets tangled, nothing strange. Then, around 2:40 in the morning, the camera glitched for a second. A brief flicker, the screen going gray and streaked, before it cleared again. For a moment, nothing seemed wrong. I was still asleep, curled on my side, face buried in the pillow. But then I saw it. The blanket at the foot of the bed shifted, like something had pulled it slightly. And then, in the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds, a pale shape emerged at the edge of the frame. It leaned closer, head tilting, until a face came into view. His face, the same one I had seen in the reflection, the same pale features, the dark hollow eyes. He stood so close to the bed that if I had stretched out my hand in my sleep, I would have brushed against him. He bent lower, almost like he was listening to my breathing, then straightened again. For a long time he just stood there, motionless. The recording went on for over 20 minutes like that, him not moving, me unaware. Then, without sound, he leaned down until his mouth was just inches from my ear. The camera picked up nothing, he said, just static. But I swear I could almost feel the whisper as I watched, like an echo in my own memory. When I woke up that morning, I had no memory of anything unusual. I had thought I slept straight through. Seeing the truth on that footage left me sick to my stomach. I deleted the file and yanked the camera from the wall, but the damage was done. Now I knew he was not just in my head. He was in the room. I could not keep it to myself anymore. I called my friend Sarah, someone I had known since college, and asked if she could come over. I tried to explain, stumbling through the details, leaving out enough so that I did not sound completely insane. To her credit, she did not laugh or hang up. She said she would stop by that evening. When she arrived, I almost hugged her in relief. Having another person there made the air feel lighter, less oppressive. I poured us drinks, trying to act casual, but she quickly noticed I was wound tight. "Show me what you saw," she said gently. I told her about the bus, the whisper, the reflection, the footage. I could see the skepticism in her eyes, but she listened. When I mentioned the man's face, her expression changed just slightly. "What did he look like?" she asked. I described him again. Tall, pale, hollow eyes, no real expression except that tilted stare. Her hands tightened around the glass. "I saw someone like that once," she admitted quietly. "Back in high school. On a bus, actually. I thought it was a dream or maybe a trick of the light, but it sounds like the same guy." My skin prickled all over. What were the chances she would say that? We sat in silence for a while, both of us staring at the blank TV screen. That night, she offered to stay over. I said yes immediately. I figured 2 people together would be safer, or at least less terrifying. We set up camp in the living room, blankets and pillows on the couch and floor. I left the lights on, as usual. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of whispering. My throat went dry. Slowly, I sat up and looked toward the hallway. Sarah stirred beside me, blinking sleepily. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, her face pale. The whispering grew louder, though we still could not make out words. It seemed to seep from the walls themselves, coming from every direction. I grabbed her hand, and we sat frozen as the sound wound its way closer. Then it stopped. I almost let out a sigh of relief, but Sarah's nails dug into my arm. I followed her gaze to the hallway doorway. He was standing there, tall, pale, head tilted, watching us. For a full 10 seconds, neither of us moved. Then I scrambled for my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the room, lighting up the doorway. Empty. He was gone. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. "I saw him," she said. "You are not crazy." I saw him too. We did not sleep the rest of the night. We sat there with every light blazing, clutching mugs of coffee like lifelines, jumping at every sound. By dawn, we were both shaking and exhausted. Sarah swore she believed me now, but that was no comfort. If anything, it was worse, because it meant he was real. And he was not just mine. After that night with Sarah, I realized something had changed. Before, I had been able to convince myself that maybe it was all in my head. Stress, lack of sleep, imagination running wild. But the second she admitted she saw him too, that possibility was gone. It was worse to have someone confirm it, because now I could not retreat into denial. Now I knew he was real, and once you know, there is no putting that back. The following days were strange. I kept thinking I would feel safer with company, so I asked Sarah to stay a few more nights. She agreed, though I could tell she was uneasy. Having her around helped, but only to a point. We would be sitting in the living room and both suddenly fall quiet at the same time, sensing the same thing. The whisper that seemed to ride the air like static, the shift of shadows across the walls that did not match the lights in the room. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. The worst part was that he did not only show up at night anymore. Twice, I thought I saw him during the day. Once, walking back from the corner store, I spotted a tall figure reflected in a passing car window. When I spun around, there was nothing behind me but empty pavement. Another time, I glanced at a glass door in my office building, and for half a second, his pale face stared back. I stumbled so hard that my coworker asked if I was drunk. I laughed it off, but my stomach was twisted into knots. Sarah tried to help. She brought over books she had picked up from a used shop about hauntings and entities and things that sounded ridiculous if you said them out loud. We went through them late one night with mugs of tea, the pages smelling like dust and mildew. Every description sounded too close. Shadow man, watcher spirit, attached entity, protector turned parasite. Whatever label the authors gave, it came down to the same sick fact. It was not leaving on its own. That realization started eating at us. We tried everything the book suggested: salt around the doors, candles, incense, even a prayer circle, which Sarah admitted felt cheesy but worth a shot. Nothing worked. In fact, it seemed to get worse. The more we tried, the closer he got. The fourth night, Sarah stayed over. I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. No sound this time, just a sudden jolt of awareness, like my body knew before my mind caught up. I sat up slowly and realized the air felt heavier than usual, thicker. Sarah was on the couch, breathing unevenly, maybe dreaming. I was about to get up to check on her when I saw him. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, half shadow, half form, his head tilted at that same unnatural angle. This time he was closer than ever, just a few steps from us. My mouth went dry, and I could not even whisper Sarah's name. I sat frozen, heart slamming in my chest, as he lifted one hand and pointed directly at me. The gesture was slow, deliberate. Not a threat, not a wave, just that pointed finger, like I was the only thing in the world he cared about. Then, without a sound, he lowered it and stepped back into the shadows. I finally managed to shake Sarah awake. She saw my face and did not even ask, just grabbed her bag and said she was leaving. I begged her not to, but she said she could not take it anymore. She promised she would call me, but she could not stay in the apartment again. Her leaving broke me. I understood it, but it left me feeling even more exposed. Now it was just me, alone with him. The next day at work, I caught myself staring at the security monitors in the lobby like I had that first night on the bus. The screens were grainy, but I swore I saw him in the background of one. Standing by the elevator, staring straight into the camera. I blinked, and he was gone. Nobody else saw him, or if they did, they said nothing. That night, I decided to check the bus again. Maybe it was stupid, maybe it was exactly what he wanted, but I had to know if going back there would change anything. I told myself it was about facing fear, taking control, but really it was just desperation. I boarded the late-night bus at almost the same time as before. The seats were mostly empty, just a couple of tired commuters staring at their phones. I sat in the middle, gripping the bar so tightly my knuckles hurt, waiting. I kept glancing back, half expecting him to appear right behind me. But nothing happened. The bus rattled along in silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it after all. Then I noticed the reflection in the window. Not my reflection, but his. Sitting in the seat directly behind me, pale face lit faintly by the passing streetlights. He was not visible when I turned my head, but in the glass, he was right there, leaning closer. I could not breathe. I gripped my phone in my lap, pretending to scroll, but my eyes never left the reflection. At one stop, a man boarded and sat a few rows up. I almost cried in relief, thankful for another body in the space. But when I looked back at the reflection, the pale face was still there, watching. I got off at the next stop, almost running down the steps. The driver gave me a weird look but said nothing. When the bus pulled away, I stood shaking on the sidewalk, trying to calm my breathing. That night, when I finally made it home, there was a note slipped under my door. It was just one sentence, written in shaky block letters. "You should have stayed on the bus." The note rattled me worse than anything else so far, maybe because it proved something I had been trying not to accept. He was not just showing up on the bus or in reflections. He could get into my space. He knew where I lived, and the worst part was that he was trying to talk to me. I shoved the note into a drawer, but it did not matter. The words stuck in my head. "You should have stayed on the bus," like he had some plan for me and I had ruined it by stepping off. That week, I barely slept. Every sound jolted me awake. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, convinced I could hear the faintest breathing in the corner of the room. At work, I caught myself staring at reflections again, half expecting to see him in every glass door or computer screen. Sometimes I did. Once, in the reflection of my darkened monitor after hours, he stood right behind my chair. By the time I spun around, the office was empty. Sarah stopped answering my calls. I could not blame her. She had seen enough to know it was real, and maybe she had enough sense to get away before it got worse. I wanted to do the same, but where was I supposed to go? If he had followed me home from the bus, if he had gotten inside my apartment without a sound, then moving or running would not help. He was attached to me now. I tried small things to feel in control again. Double and triple checking locks, leaving lights on all night, setting up my phone to record while I slept, though I never had the courage to watch the full videos the next day. I would skim through a few minutes, see nothing obvious, and then delete them before I saw something that would make me lose my mind completely. One night, around 3 a.m, I woke to the sound of my bedroom door creaking. I had left it closed tight, but now it was opening slowly, inch by inch. I froze under the blanket, heart hammering, telling myself it was just the air vent or a draft. But then I saw the shadow. It was long, stretched across the carpet, moving even though nothing in the room was shifting. The shape of a man leaning forward. I shut my eyes and whispered out loud, "Please, please leave me alone." When I opened them again, the door was fully open, and the shadow was gone. The next morning I found another note. This one was tucked under my coffee mug in the kitchen, as if he had been watching me long enough to know exactly where I went first thing in the morning. The note was shorter this time. Just one word: soon. I wanted to burn it, but I kept it with the first note, stuffed into the same drawer. I told myself that if I ever needed proof for anyone else, I would have it. Not that I knew who would believe me, or who I could even tell. The police? What would I say? That a man who only exists in reflections was breaking into my apartment to leave me cryptic warnings. They would lock me up faster than they would help me. I started carrying a knife. Nothing huge, just a kitchen knife. I slipped into my jacket pocket whenever I left the apartment. I told myself it was ridiculous, but it made me feel a little better. Of course, deep down I knew it would not matter. If he was what I thought he was, no blade in the world was going to protect me. Then came the worst night yet. I had fallen asleep on the couch, too tired to drag myself to bed. At exactly 2:45, I woke to the sound of whispering. At first I thought it was from the street outside, but the longer I listened, the more I realized it was inside the apartment. Low, steady, like someone speaking to themselves just a few feet away. I reached for my phone, but the screen would not turn on. Dead battery. My knife was still in my pocket, so I wrapped my hand around it and tried to slow my breathing. The whispering moved closer, right behind the couch. I forced myself to turn my head. In the reflection of the dark TV screen across the room, I saw him. Not just a face this time, but his whole shape, tall and wrong, standing inches behind me. He was bent down slightly, like he was leaning to listen. His mouth was moving, though the whisper I heard was not quite in sync with the reflection. I spun around, knife in hand, but the room was empty. The whispering stopped. I could not stay in the apartment after that. I grabbed my keys and bolted into the night, not even bothering with shoes. I drove aimlessly for an hour, windows down, radio blasting, anything to drown out the silence. I finally pulled into a gas station and sat there under the fluorescent lights, trembling. That is when I noticed the new note. It was wedged under my windshield wiper, waiting for me. My stomach dropped as I stepped out to grab it. It said, "Do not run again." No signature, no explanation, just that warning. By the time I got back home, dawn was breaking. I sat in my car outside the building, staring at the windows of my apartment, half expecting to see him watching from inside. But the place looked ordinary, empty, safe. I forced myself upstairs, every step feeling heavier than the last. Inside, the air felt normal, but I knew better. I checked the drawer where I had stuffed the other notes. They were all still there, lined up like a collection. That was when it hit me. He wanted me to keep them. He wanted me to carry them, to read them over and over until they were etched into me. This was not just about haunting me. It was about control, about breaking me down piece by piece until I was too tired to resist. And I was already halfway there. The sixth note was the one that finally broke me. I found it inside my wallet, tucked neatly behind my ID. That detail is what chilled me most. It meant he had touched the one thing I never let out of my sight, the one thing I always carried on me. The words were written in the same uneven handwriting as the others, but this one said, "Last ride." It should not have made sense. Last ride could mean anything, but I knew instantly what he meant. He wanted me back on the bus, the one place this whole nightmare had started. For days I fought it. I tried to live normally, going to work, coming home, ignoring the drawer full of notes. But I could feel the pressure building, like the air in the apartment was heavier, thicker, every time I closed the door behind me. I kept waking at 2 a.m, that exact same minute every night, to the sound of someone whispering in the hall. I would get up, check every corner, and find nothing, but the whispering would cling to my ears even after silence returned. By the end of the week, I was done. Sleep-deprived, shaking, unable to focus. I knew that if I did not go back, he would not stop. Maybe I was walking into a trap. Maybe that was the point. But I was past caring. So Friday night, I drove to the same bus stop where it all began. I sat there for almost half an hour before the late-night bus pulled up, headlights cutting through the empty street. The driver was not the same as before. An older man, heavy-set, with a tired expression. I paid my fare and stepped on. The bus was empty. I did not go to the back this time. I sat in the middle row, staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the reflection in the windows. The bus rolled through town, past dark storefronts and shuttered diners, and with each stop my pulse quickened. Every squeak of the brakes, every hiss of the doors made me think he would finally step on. And then, without ever seeing him board, I knew he was there. The air changed. Heavy, damp, like the inside of a basement. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I caught the faint smell of stale cologne. Slowly, Against every instinct in me, I glanced at the reflection in the window. He was sitting directly behind me, closer than he had ever been before, his face pale and expressionless. But this time he did not whisper. He did not lean forward. He just sat there, eyes locked on mine in the reflection. I froze, gripping the edge of the seat so hard my knuckles went white. The driver never turned around. The road stretched on, empty, endless. I could not tell where we were anymore. No landmarks, no traffic lights, just black pavement and trees sliding past. Finally, I forced myself to speak. My voice cracked when I asked, "What do you want from me?" The reflection smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated, just a small curl of the lips. Then he whispered, almost kindly, "You should have listened." The bus jolted hard, and I realized it was pulling into the depot. The lights flickered. When I looked again, the reflection was gone. The seat behind me was empty. I stumbled off the bus, legs weak, head spinning. The driver never said a word, just closed the doors and drove away into the night. That was 2 months ago. I have not seen him since. No new notes, no whispers, no shadows in the corners of my apartment. Sometimes I catch myself thinking maybe it is finally over. Maybe I gave him what he wanted just by riding the bus one last time. But then the doubts creep back in. I will be walking to work and swear I hear footsteps in sync with mine. Or I will glance at a store window and, for half a second, see a pale shape in the reflection. It always vanishes before I can be sure. I do not tell anyone about it anymore. Sarah has moved on, and I cannot blame her. The police would laugh me out of the station, so I keep it all to myself. Here is the truth, though. I still ride the bus sometimes. Not every night, not even every week, but often enough. And each time I do, I sit in the middle row, stare at the window, and wait. Because deep down, I know it was not the last ride. It was just the beginning of something I will never understand. And until he decides otherwise, I am his passenger. This is one of those stories I almost didn't tell. Even now, I feel weird writing it down. Not because I'm afraid of sounding crazy, though, yeah, there's some of that, but mostly because part of me still thinks maybe it was someone else. That I saw what I wanted to see, or didn't want to see, depending on how you look at it. But I know what I saw. I just don't know what it means. It started 2 Saturdays ago, just before 9 in the morning. I remember that because I had slept in for once and was walking down to the corner deli to get a coffee and maybe one of those awful but comforting egg sandwiches they keep in the foil wraps. It was gray out. The kind of overcast that makes everything feel like it's happening a little underwater. Still cool from the night, barely any wind. I had just rounded the corner near the intersection on 37th and noticed someone at the bus stop across the street. Older guy, grayish hair, big shoulders. Worn brown jacket with one side a little longer than the other, like it had been tugged down too many times. It took me a second, but something about the way he shifted his weight triggered this deep, bone-level recognition. The limp. It was subtle, more like a favoring of one side, but I'd seen that walk 1,000 times. My dad used to do that exact same shuffle. He injured his hip doing construction when I was a kid, and never really fixed it. Said it made him look distinguished. Said it gave him a little character. That was his phrase. So I stopped walking. This guy, the one at the bus stop, turned slightly, and I swear to you, I almost called out. Because it wasn't just the limp, it was his face. My dad's face. Not someone who looked like him, not someone in the same age range or body type, I mean the exact face. The same sun-weathered skin. The same way his jaw clenched when he was thinking. Even the thinning spot at the crown of his head, it was like seeing a ghost, except he wasn't glowing or floating or anything. He was just standing there, real, solid, breathing. I stood half hidden behind a parked van for maybe 30 seconds, trying to make sense of it. My heart was pounding, but I didn't move. I didn't even think to pull out my phone. I just stared. Then he turned his head, and our eyes met. And that's when the bottom dropped out of it. His left eye looked fine, brown, sharp, just like I remembered. But the right one, the one that always squinted more than the other when he smiled, it didn't move. It didn't focus. It looked like glass. Like it had been set in, not grown there. The skin around it didn't match either. Too smooth, almost like it had been pulled tight and fitted wrong. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like I was the one who was out of place, like I should have known this moment was coming. Then the bus pulled up. He boarded without a word, no glance back. I stood there long enough for the second bus to come and go. I didn't even get the coffee. When I finally made it home, I sat on the edge of my bed for almost an hour, trying to figure out what to do. Should I tell someone? A friend? A doctor? Was it even real? Could someone have found a photo of my dad and made a mask? But why? He wasn't famous. He was just a guy, a construction worker from Queens who passed away from a heart issue 5 years ago. Closed casket. I was there. I spoke at the funeral. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that glassy eye. The way it didn't blink, the way his face didn't quite move right when he turned. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning. When I opened my apartment door, there was a photograph on the floor. Just one. No envelope, no note. It was a printed photo, like the kind you get from a disposable camera or an old film roll. Matte finish, sharp colors. It was me, sleeping. I was on my side, in my bed, the covers pulled up to my chest. The angle was from the doorway, like whoever took it was standing just inside my room. You could see the back of my nightstand, the corner of the closet. It was definitely my apartment. But that's not all. In the photo, there was a hand. Just one. In the bottom right corner, out of focus, but visible, reaching slightly toward the edge of the bed. And I swear to you, it was his hand. Same thick fingers, same worn skin, the exact way my dad's knuckles bent when he reached for something. I dropped the photo, backed away from it like it might bite. Then I locked the door, deadbolt and chain. I didn't leave my apartment the rest of the day. I kept the lights on, even though it was bright out. I went through every closet, every cabinet. I checked the windows. I checked under the bed. Nothing. Nothing that said anyone had been there. The place looked exactly like it always did. But I knew something had changed. Someone had been inside, and they wanted me to know they had been close enough to touch me. I didn't sleep much that night either. It was like every time I shut my eyes, I saw that photograph again. Not the whole thing, just fragments. The edges, the hand. My own face, half buried in the pillow, mouth slightly open, completely unaware. It made me feel vulnerable in a way I hadn't felt since I was a kid. Not scared of monsters or anything, just scared of not knowing who might be near you when you're not looking. I kept checking the locks, front door, windows, even the sliding latch on the bathroom. I don't think I've ever locked the bathroom in my own apartment before, but I did that night, just to be sure. The next morning, I took the photo and put it in a drawer, not to forget about it, but to contain it. Leaving it out made me feel like I was inviting it to happen again. I didn't throw it away, though. I wanted to badly, but something stopped me. Maybe because part of me still needed proof it actually happened, that I didn't just imagine the whole thing, that I didn't fall asleep in front of some creepy movie and dream the rest. Around noon I went outside, not because I wanted to, but because I had to see the bus stop again, just to make sure I hadn't filled in details that weren't there. The sky was clear this time. Everything looked normal. Same graffiti on the side of the bench, same faded schedule in the case. Nothing strange, no one waiting. I stood there for a while, trying to replay the moment in my head, the way he moved, the way he looked at me, and more than anything, that eye. That glassy, unfocused eye that didn't match the rest of his face. If someone was trying to fake being my dad, they did a weird job of it. Like they got almost everything right, except for one big thing. That part still didn't make sense. And then there was the jacket. That brown one he always wore. I hadn't thought about it in years, but standing there at the bus stop, it hit me I still had it, folded up in a plastic bin in the closet. I had kept it after he passed, along with some other clothes and his old tool belt. I hadn't looked at that stuff in forever. When I got home, I pulled the bin out. There it was, same worn collar, same faint grease stain on the left sleeve from when he spilled something working on his truck. I held it up and checked the pocket. Inside was a movie ticket stub from the week before he died. So the one at the bus stop couldn't have been his, at least not the real one. Still, the feeling didn't go away. That night, I didn't bother trying to sleep right away. I made coffee around 10 and stayed up in the living room with the lights on. I didn't turn on the TV. Just sat there, waiting to hear something. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe another photo. A knock, something subtle. What happened instead was weirder. At about 1 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Nothing unusual at first, old building, people come and go, but these were slow, deliberate. And they stopped right outside my door. I turned off the lamp and sat perfectly still. No knock. No voice. Just silence. Then the mail slot creaked open. It didn't make a sound for a second, and then I saw something slide through. I waited a full minute before walking over. It wasn't another photo this time. It was a strip of paper, narrow, torn from something larger, and on it, in handwriting I swear I recognized, were 3 words. You forgot me. That's it. No signature, no explanation. Just that sentence, like an accusation, or a warning, or something in between. I stood there holding it, trying to place the handwriting. It wasn't perfect, but it was close to how my dad used to write notes to himself. Scraps on the fridge. Little things like call Joey or check the boiler. But this one didn't look like a reminder. It looked personal. I didn't go back to the couch. I didn't turn the lights back on. I just stood there staring through the peephole for what must have been close to 20 minutes. Nothing. When I finally looked out into the hallway, it was empty. No footsteps, no door clicks, just that humming fluorescent light and the same peeling paint near the stairwell. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I walked the whole building. Top to bottom, every hallway, every stairwell. I didn't knock on any doors. I'm not that bold, but I kept checking for anything strange. A door left cracked, a window open that shouldn't be. A neighbor I didn't recognize, but nothing stood out. Until I reached the basement. The laundry room was empty, one light flickering. The machines were off. But on the far wall, near the utility panel, someone had scratched something into the metal. It was faint, barely visible. But it said the same thing. You forgot me. Same phrasing, no punctuation, same feeling. I left immediately. I still don't know what I'm dealing with. Someone pretending to be him, a stranger with some weird agenda, a sick prank from someone who knew us both. And I hate even thinking this something else, something I don't have words for. But whatever it is, it's not random. It knows who I am, and now it wants me to remember something I've clearly tried to forget. I kept the strip of paper in my wallet. I don't know why. I didn't want to look at it again, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. It felt like evidence. Not the kind you bring to the cops, I knew how that would go, but the kind you hold on to when something doesn't feel finished. It was the same reason I still had the photo. Same reason I started locking the deadbolt even when I was home in the middle of the day. That whole week I kept waiting for something else. Another message, another noise, another person in the hallway who looked almost familiar, but not quite. But nothing happened. Nothing obvious anyway. Still, I could feel it. Not the kind of fear that rushes in and takes over. More like a slow build-up, like walking around your apartment with a cup of water and realizing every time you pass the hallway you spill a little without noticing. Then one day the floor is soaked and you don't remember doing anything different. That's what it felt like. One night I came home from work and my kitchen window was unlocked, just a crack. Not wide enough to think someone climbed through, but I never left it open, ever. I always made a point to check every lock before I left the apartment. It had become a ritual even before all of this. I didn't sleep in my bed that night. I stayed on the couch, half watching late-night cable and half just listening. Every creak sounded wrong. Every gust of wind through the hallway vent made me freeze. But nothing came. In the morning, I made myself go through the motions. Shower, eat, check the mail. Except this time, when I checked the hallway, something new was waiting for me. It wasn't another note or photo. It was a book. Hardcover, black spine, no title. It was leaning against my door like someone had left it there on purpose, not dropped, not lost, placed. I took it inside and sat with it at the kitchen table for almost an hour before I even opened it. Inside, it was filled with old newspaper clippings, all glued in, page after page. Most of them were small blurbs. Local news stories from the 90s and early 2000s. A couple were from my neighborhood, fires, arrests, obituaries. About 15 pages in, I found one that made me stop. It was about my dad. Not a headline or anything, just a few paragraphs buried in a community column about a union protest at a construction site. His name was there, and next to it a photo I had never seen before. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakably him, standing with a group of guys all wearing hard hats. He was looking off to the side, not at the camera. Someone had circled his face in pen. No caption. I flipped through more pages, faster now. The farther I got, the more the clippings shifted. Less local news, more personal. One article was about a missing person, a teenage boy from another borough. No real connection to my dad or me, as far as I could tell. But that one had a note scribbled in the margin. Too late. Another article was about a fire in an abandoned building. No injuries, just property damage. The next page was blank, just an old Polaroid taped to the center. It showed a door. Just a door, unmarked, wooden. Could have been anywhere. It made my stomach turn, not because of what it showed, but because I recognized the doormat. It was the same one from the building across the street, beige with a tear in the corner. I had passed it 100 times. That night, I stood outside that door. I didn't knock. I didn't even step close. I just watched it, long enough to know no one was coming or going, long enough to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. I left the building and went home. The next morning, my doormat was gone. Just gone. The floor was clean, like someone had picked it up and shaken it out. Nothing else disturbed, just that one detail removed. I wish I could say that was the moment I called someone, a friend, a therapist, even the police. But I didn't. Instead, I went back to the book. Near the end, tucked between 2 pages, I found a torn envelope. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was me again. Same angle as before, same position in bed, but this time the camera had pulled back. You could see more of the room. And standing at the foot of the bed in the shadows was a figure. Not fully visible, just the outline, but enough to see the broad shoulders, the jacket, the limp. This time the photo wasn't just proof that someone had been there. It was a message. I was not alone. I had never been alone. And whoever this was wearing my dad's face, or pretending to, they were done waiting. They were showing me what they wanted me to see, piece by piece. I kept the second photo in a drawer next to the first one, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. It felt like crossing a line, like if I tore it up or threw it away, something might escalate. I didn't say that out loud, obviously. I didn't even want to admit it to myself. But the thought was there, stuck in the back of my mind like a splinter. Over the next few days, I checked the hallway every morning before opening my door. No more books, no more notes, no more photographs, but I still felt like I was being watched. That part never went away. I stopped sleeping with my bedroom door shut. I started leaving lights on in the living room and kitchen. I started using my phone camera to take pictures of the locks before I went to sleep, just to reassure myself that I had actually locked them. The day after I found the second photo, I walked to the building across the street. the one with the doormat I had seen in the Polaroid. I didn't do anything dramatic, just walked past slowly, eyes down. The door looked the same, still unmarked, still closed, but the mat was different now, newer, same color, but clean, no rip in the corner. That could have meant anything. Still, something about it made my chest tighten. I thought about buzzing random apartments, pretending I had the wrong floor, but that felt risky. I wasn't ready for a confrontation. I was barely holding it together as it was. I walked home and didn't go back the rest of the week. I kept thinking about the note, "You forgot me." It had stopped sounding like a threat. It felt more like something personal, like whoever was doing this really believed I had wronged them somehow, that I had abandoned something important. And then I started thinking about my dad. Not the image from the bus stop or the fake version standing in the photo, but the real man, the one I remembered growing up. He was rough sometimes, quiet but strict, didn't like being questioned. Didn't show a lot of affection, but he tried in his own way. Left me tools instead of birthday cards. Took me to work sites instead of ball games. That was his version of bonding. We weren't close near the end. He got sick fast, and I wasn't good at hospitals. I visited less than I should have. When he died, I think I let the whole thing fade quicker than I was supposed to. I boxed up his stuff and barely looked back. I never really grieved, not properly. Maybe that was part of this. Maybe this was my brain pulling up some guilt I had never dealt with. That night, I sat in the kitchen with all the lights off and tried to remember the sound of his voice. It didn't come easily. That scared me more than anything. The next morning, there was something new on my table. I swear I locked every window and door. I checked the photo of the locks on my phone. Everything was just as I left it. But sitting on the center of the table was an envelope. Just one, unsealed, no writing on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. There were 5 names written on it, all in the same handwriting as before. Careful, neat, like someone who took their time. I didn't recognize any of them. I typed each one into a search bar. The first was a woman who went missing 10 years ago in Brooklyn. The second was a man who died in a fire, same neighborhood. The third was listed in a court case as a witness who later recanted. The fourth had no results at all. The fifth one had an obituary, cause of death listed as undetermined. I stared at that list for a long time, not knowing what to do with it. Were these victims? Witnesses? Was this a threat? A confession? Why was it left for me? What did it have to do with my father? I pulled out the old black book again, the one I found on my doorstep. I flipped through the clippings. Some of the names matched, not all, but 2. One from the fire, one from the court case. I hadn't noticed the overlap before. Now I started wondering if someone was using me to relive something, or maybe to finish something. I went back to the hallway camera feed on my phone. I had installed it years ago when packages started getting stolen. I had stopped checking it regularly, but now I scrubbed through the last 2 nights. Around 3 in the morning, I found it. A figure, blurred by the poor lighting, approached my door slowly, crouched down, stayed in frame for less than 10 seconds. No face visible, jacket hood up, broad shoulders, same shape. They left the envelope, then turned and walked away, not in a rush, like they knew no one would be watching. I saved the clip. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't report it. I just watched it 3 times in a row, trying to see something that would help me feel less like I was unraveling. I couldn't. That night I didn't try to sleep. I sat up in bed with the list beside me. I read each name out loud, quietly, like I was trying to bring them into the room, like maybe one of them would mean something if I heard it in my own voice. And then I remembered something. A photograph I hadn't looked at in years, an old one, from my dad's workshop. I pulled out the box I had stored his things in. At the bottom was a faded picture of him standing in front of the garage. Behind him were 3 men, none of them labeled. I had always assumed they were just co-workers. Now I wasn't so sure. Because one of them, I swear, had the same face as the man from the hallway camera. And if I was right, that meant this didn't start last week. It started a long time ago. And maybe I was just the next person on the list. I sat with that photograph for a long time, not doing anything with it, just looking. The guy in the back third from the left, same jawline, same shoulders, same posture as the one from the hallway camera. The hair was shorter, and he looked younger, but something about the way he held himself made my stomach knot. There was a familiarity in how he angled his body slightly away from the camera, as if even then he didn't want to be seen head-on. I flipped the photo over. Blank. No names, no date. It looked like it had been taken in the early 2000s, maybe earlier. My dad was clean-shaven, which he hadn't been since I was in high school. The garage in the background had the old sign still up, Brenner and Sons Contracting, before they dropped the and Sons and just went by initials. I hadn't thought about that in years. The rest of that day passed in a fog. I didn't eat much. I left the envelope with the 5 names out on the table, lined up beside the black book. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't even sure I wanted answers anymore. It was starting to feel like the deeper I looked, the more I lost control of the story, like it wasn't mine anymore. Like it had shifted from something happening to me into something I was being dragged into. I went outside for a while just to get air, walked 3 blocks up and 2 over, didn't talk to anyone, just tried to move, tried to feel normal. It didn't work. Every face I passed looked a little too sharp. Every noise made me jump. I kept checking windows, checking reflections. I couldn't help it. That night I didn't plan to stay up, but my body wouldn't let me rest. Around 2:30 in the morning, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a faint shuffle near the back window, the one in the bathroom. It's frosted glass, so you can't really see through it, just shapes, outlines. But there was definitely movement. Just for a second. I waited, holding my breath. Nothing followed. Still, I grabbed my phone and stepped into the hallway. I didn't want to call the police. I didn't have anything solid to tell them, but I was done pretending this was normal. I called Kayla instead. She was the only person I trusted to believe me without jumping to conclusions. We hadn't talked in months, but I didn't care. I needed someone else to hear what was happening. I kept my voice low. "Someone's been in my place," I said, more than once. There was silence on the other end for a second. Then she said, "Is this about your dad?" That threw me. I hadn't mentioned him yet, not directly, just said someone had been watching me, leaving things. "How did you know that?" I asked. Another pause. Then she said, "Do you remember that night he picked us up from the movies in high school? You fell asleep in the back seat." I didn't answer. "I heard him talking to someone in the front," she said, "but no one else was there." I remembered that night, barely. It had snowed earlier in the day. The windshield had fogged up. I thought he was just talking to himself. I didn't even think it was weird at the time. He said something like, "It's not time yet," she said, and then, "He'll remember when he's ready." I never asked him about it. I sat down on the floor, cold tile beneath me, still holding the phone. I didn't know what to say. She spoke again. I don't think it was a stranger at the bus stop. My throat felt tight. "I think it was someone he knew," she said. "Someone he brought around once, a long time ago. I saw him in a picture in your house once, in the background. I always remembered his eyes." Neither of us said anything for a while after that. Eventually, I hung up and sat in the dark for what felt like hours, trying to piece together how far back this went. If it was about my dad, and if other people had noticed something strange even when he was alive, then maybe it wasn't about me at all. Maybe I was just caught in the spillover of something older. When the sun came up, I went back to the photo. The garage, the three men, my dad in front. I scanned it again and noticed something I hadn't before. There was a door behind them, just barely visible, partially open, and someone was standing just inside it, almost hidden by shadow. Only half their face visible. And that face looked exactly like mine. Not similar. Exactly. My blood ran cold, but not in the dramatic movie way, more like a full body quiet. My fingers felt numb, my ears rang a little. I had no memory of being at that garage, no memory of ever being near that place while my dad was working, but it was me, or someone who wore my face, not like the man at the bus stop. This one was younger. My age now. Same expression I'd seen in the mirror 100 times. And suddenly, I remembered what Kayla said. "He'll remember when he's ready." I put the photo down, stared at the wall, and asked myself the question I had been avoiding since the beginning. What if this wasn't someone copying my dad? What if this was about who he thought I would become? And what if he wasn't wrong? I stopped trying to explain it. That was the only way I could move forward. I had spent too much time tying everything together like it was a puzzle that just needed one more piece. One more clue, one more memory, one more old photo. But the more I tried to make sense of it, the more I felt like I was circling something that didn't want to be solved. It took me a while to realize it wasn't a mystery. It was a fracture, a slow tear in the line between memory and reality, between what I knew and what I believed. The day after I found the photo with my own face in the background, I went through every box I had from my dad's old life, every paper, every photo, every scrap I'd saved out of guilt more than sentiment. I looked for any mention of the men in that garage photo. There was nothing, no names, no notes. The picture itself had no context, just 4 men outside a shop and one barely visible figure in the dark. I didn't recognize myself in that photo, not really. But the face was mine, and that meant something was wrong. Not supernatural, not sci-fi, just wrong in a quieter, heavier way. I started writing everything down, not to publish or show anyone, just to track it, to put it somewhere outside my head. If I could pin it to paper, maybe I could separate what had happened from what I thought had happened. The bus stop, the photo under my door, the book, the names, the list. The fact that someone or something kept showing up wearing my dad's face or my own and leaving pieces behind. I thought about getting help. I thought about it a lot. There were moments, quiet ones, usually around 4 in the morning, where I was almost sure I was having a break. Not a dramatic collapse, just a steady drift into something I couldn't walk back from. I hadn't told anyone everything, not Kayla, not even myself. I had only hinted, and I knew why. Because the part I was afraid to admit out loud was that I didn't want it to stop. That sounds awful, but it's the truth. Somewhere in all the fear and confusion, there was this undercurrent of meaning, like whoever or whatever was behind it all had been trying to show me something real, not to hurt me, but to remind me. Of what, I wasn't sure, but it felt like it had to do with my dad, with the kind of man he had been, with the kind of man he thought I was going to be. I started hearing things again. Not whispers, not voices, just sounds, in the vents, in the hallway. At first I thought it was paranoia, but then I started recording them. Not with my phone, but with an old handheld recorder I found in one of my dad's boxes, the kind with the little cassette tapes. I'd leave it running at night. In the morning, I'd play it back. Mostly static, a few creaks. One night, there was a voice, not loud, not clear, but real. It said, "You're almost there." That was all. Just that one sentence. I played it over and over until the tape wore out. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know how. The next night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No nightmares, no waking up in a sweat, just sleep. And when I woke up, there was a third photo. This time it was not inside the apartment. It was outside, under the mat at the front door, which was strange because I had not replaced the mat since it went missing. But there it was, the same mat, same tear in the corner. The photo showed me walking away from a building. My building, shot from behind. I was wearing clothes I hadn't worn in years, a jacket I gave away after college, sneakers I threw out after they split. My hair was shorter, my posture looked different. I almost didn't recognize myself. But it was me. The timestamp, if it could be believed, was dated 5 years earlier. And suddenly I remembered something I hadn't thought about in forever. There had been a night back then, around the time of my dad's funeral, when I thought I saw someone following me on the train platform. I remembered the way I kept looking over my shoulder, the way I walked home faster than usual, the way I told myself it was nothing. And now I was looking at proof that someone had been following me, back then, before the bus stop, before the photo, before the whisper. It had started earlier than I realized. Maybe it had never really stopped. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I just sat down on the steps and held the photo in both hands. And I realized something else. I was never supposed to figure it out. This wasn't about solving a mystery. This was about confronting a part of myself I had tried to bury: grief, guilt, memory, fear, all the stuff I had packed away after my dad died, all the things I told myself didn't matter. The quiet inheritance no one talks about. The mental cracks that start to spread when you pretend you're fine for too long. So I stopped pretending. I started therapy. It's not dramatic, no big revelations yet, but I'm talking, I'm asking questions, I'm sleeping better. Sometimes I still hear things. A cough in the vent, a knock that no one else hears. Sometimes I think I see him, my dad, not the one from the bus stop, the real one, just out of the corner of my eye, standing in doorways, watching me as I move from one room to the next. But I don't run from it anymore. I just nod, because I think maybe this whole time that's all he wanted, for me to see what he left behind, for me to face it. And now, finally, I am.